What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty, and welcome to another amazing video. You can follow me on Patreon for exclusive stories. 9 hectoseconds. Chapter 196. The restoration of the village is proceeding in an orderly manner. The houses and buildings destroyed by the invaders are gradually restored to their original state. Although there are many Konoha Shinobi who died in the Konoha collapse plan, they are not to the point where the village is completely inoperable. However, the number of tasks commissioned will not decrease due to the reduction of ninjas, so many ninjas who should have been idle have to get busy during this time. Izumi is one of them, but although she was unwilling to go out to perform tasks when she just became a lover with Iruka and was about to consolidate the hard-won relationship, she did not accept those that Jonin should accept as an elite. A difficult task that takes a while to complete the village, but chooses tasks that can be completed in a short time, such as removing bandits, escorting officials, and killing wild boars that destroy crops. Of course, Kakashi, Guy, Bayunishin and others who are also the elite Jonin can't be as willful as Izumi mi. After all, Iruka is behind Izumi mi. The Konoha high level who knows Iruka's unfathomable strength will naturally not embarrass her. The days have gradually returned to calm, but this does not mean that Iruka's daily life has not changed a bit. I said Kwanmei, don't you want to say this is sleepwalking again? Iruka said helplessly at this moment Izumi, who was lying in his arms. From the day when I knew each other's heart and became lovers, Iruka just regained consciousness every morning, I could feel the weight of his body. Of course, this is not because he and Izumi have already crossed the line, and Izumi has not set foot on the adult ladder. In fact, they still sleep separately now, at least before the lights are turned off at night. Hee. Izumi raised her head with a cute smile on her face, but she didn't mean to stand up. What do you think is what you think, Mr. Iruka? You seem to be used to such a daily routine. Obviously when I first started, I always wanted to sneak in while I was not awake. Are you really awake then? Iruka said irritably, but Izumi naturally ignored his dissatisfaction. She put her hands on Iruka's chest and held her cheeks. There was an intoxicating red on her delicate face, as if she could speak. Her big eyes were facing Iruka's dead fish eyes, and her warm breath slapped Iruka's scar face, making Iruka's face a little unnatural. The atmosphere became glamorous for a while. Iruka was not used to this atmosphere. Just when he was about to propose to get up, Izumi suddenly reached out and put her hand on Iruka's face, her red lips lightly opened, and she said softly. Now, Iruka, let's kiss. Izumi went out to perform a mission. As one of the village's top combat powers, she was tired of Iruka at home when others were busy, and she couldn't justify being at home alone with Iruka, and Iruka, who had just lost her first kiss, hadn't had time to appreciate the kind of letting him. The strange feeling of rapid heartbeat was disturbed by Sasuke who suddenly visited. It's been a long time, Sasuke, what can I do? Advertisement. Iruka poured a cup of tea for Sasuke, and then asked softly. Although Sasuke is one of his most valued students, he is usually busy practicing and rarely comes to him directly. Even if he does, he basically has something to do. He helped, purely because he only visited him once or twice, so Iruka subconsciously thought that Sasuke had encountered some difficulties in his cultivation. But Sasuke came just right. Iruka is planning to test Sasuke's chakra level and estimate what he might achieve to achieve the standard of freedom of practice, so as not to miss the best practice time. Sasuke nodded, and then said something unexpected to Iruka who was about to start position awareness. Ms. Iruka, I think, I have found my own idea. Yep. Hearing this, Iruka couldn't help but interrupt the use of his abilities, and then looked at him in a bit of surprise. After recovering, Iruka's face gradually showed a look of interest. Interesting, let's talk about it. Sasuke picked up the teacup and took a sip, seeming to be organizing language. After placing the teacup, he breathed out a sigh of breath, and then said. From the fetters between Shira and Zaibuchi, Iruka-sensei, you asked me to think about guardianship, to the feelings that emerged in my heart when Sakura was almost killed by Orochimaru, and then Schwanyu-sensei took me to see diffuse for the despair of the real ninja world, finally. The pain that Itachi feels, the thinking of peace, the choice of choice, I try to think about these experiences from an absolute perspective, as you said, Mr. Iruka, and then, I came to the conclusion that. After a pause, Sasuke's face suddenly condensed, and then slowly said in Iruka's astonished eyes. The world is full of all problems, including war, belief, terrorism, discrimination, corruption, etc. The root of which lies in the human heart. Everyone has their own different opinions, different dreams, and different cognitions. Reality is impossible, inclusive of everyone's ideas, therefore, something must be sacrificed, such as the Uchiha clan. So, you know the truth. Iruka sighed slightly. Although he knew that Sasuke would know the truth sooner or later, he didn't expect that this day would come so soon. He didn't know if it was a good or bad thing. After all, although he could use his ability to judge a person's strength, he couldn't judge a person's mind. When Sasuke opened the spiritual realm at the age of 7, his way of thinking could not be measured by ordinary standards, so even if he could not predict the growth rate of his mind, if Sasuke knew the truth when his mind was still immature, God knew he would not. He will have endless resentment towards the village because of the experience of Itachi who gave everything for him, and will be completely swallowed up by this resentment. If things evolve to that point, Iruka's promise to protect Konoha's position in repaying third generation will force him to destroy this student who was the closest to perfect work by himself, and grow into a unity of strength, will and philosophy for him. The expectations of the absolute strong will inevitably be completely vanished. Although there is only one word difference between philosophy and obsession, they are both factors that can drive a person to become stronger, but the essence is a world of difference. Iruka doesn't want Sasuke to get obsession under his guidance. But although I don't know how Sasuke met Itachi, from the reaction of Sasuke at this time, things did not go badly. Chapter 197 Ideas and Obsessions. My head hurts. The nature of human beings is to constantly pursue happiness, but while people are pursuing happiness, they are also destroying the happiness of others. This is an inevitable contradiction. Therefore, in order to protect something, one must sacrifice something. This is reality. The reality derived from human feelings and opinions, and there is only one way to change this reality. Sasuke raised his head, and his handsome face showed indifference that was completely disproportionate to his youth. The existence above everything establishes an absolute system, denies all people's hearts and opinions, cuts out all ambitions, re-regulates the world, and concentrates all hatred and darkness in one place. Only in this way can people usher in true peace. At the end, Sasuke's original indifferent eyes suddenly showed a touch of complexity, which was quickly replaced by unshakable determination. Iruka-sensei, I want to be that existence. Perfect. This term suddenly flashed through Iruka's mind, and the expression in his eyes when he looked at Sasuke showed admiration. Although the language is different, the meaning expressed by Sasuke gives Iruka a very strong sense of recognizing. He knows where the sense of recognizing comes from. It was in the last life and experienced countless wars, conspiracies, and killings. Later, his hands were soaked with the blood of innocent or sinful people. He was tired of all this. For the first time, he had the idea of wanting to change this status quo. After a long period of exploration with his close friends, he finally got it. The idea of having supernatural power. In other words, what Sasuke wants to walk is the road he has walked, and this is also the idea that Iruka has been guiding Sasuke to think and want him to finally get it. If I remember correctly, Sasuke is only 13 years old now, and Iruka's last life did not really have his own ideas until he was 21 years old. It has to be said that Sasuke's aptitude has been ridiculously good. Is there an absolute existence above everything? Iruka groaned for a while, and then smiled slightly in Sasuke's nervous eyes after saying it for some reason. Very good concept, Sasuke, you really did not live up to my expectations. I am proud of having a student like you. Upon hearing this, Sasuke's face suddenly loosened, when Iruka suddenly said. However, if you want to be like that, you can't be limited to one village. In other words, are you planning to leave Konoha? Sasuke nodded, and suddenly the 8 companions who had practiced with him for 5 years flashed in his mind, and his expression became a little dark. Non-vegetation, ruthless practice makes perfect. In 5 years, even a special existence like Iruka has unknowingly developed feelings for Izumi, who gets a long day and night, not to mention Sasuke, who lost almost everything at the beginning. They let Sasuke not completely step into the darkness because of the obsession of hatred. The importance of Sasuke is second only to the existence of Iruka. Because of this, the last time Sakura was almost killed by Orochimaru, he was so violent. Feelings fluctuated and Mangekyo Sharingan almost awakened, if Shikamaru hadn't arrived, in time. This would prove their importance in Sasuke's mind. To become an absolute existence, one cannot be influenced by emotions, or even influenced by anything, otherwise it will lose the qualification to stand at the highest point. Iruka once said that only an existence that grows to influence the direction of the world can get his agree. Coupled with his low-key and excessive lifestyle in the village, it is easy to judge that he will not stop the path he wants to take, but Naruto is different. They all have an inseparable bond with the village. Naruto's dream is to become Hokage. Hinata is the heir of the Hyuga clan, one of Konoha's 2 big wealthies. Ino, Shikamaru, Choji, Shino, and the family to which the tooth belongs are also Konoha. Famous, and Sakura's parents are still alive, and they are extremely dependent on Konoha. Therefore, Sasuke, who has embarked on the road destined to be full of thorns, will one day stand behind them who cannot escape the shackles of the village. Opposite. Advertisement. However, even so, Sasuke nodded without wavering, and said solemnly. Well, I heard that Tsunade, one of Sanin's, will return to the village to succeed 5th Hokage. I plan to leave tomorrow night. So urgent. Iruka was a little surprised, but he quickly realized that to leave the village, only tomorrow is the best time. Almost everyone's eyes are on the trusted Hokage. Other matters will inevitably happen. Under some influence, in this case. I don't have the consciousness to play against them yet. Sasuke whispered, and Iruka nodded in understanding. So, after all, human beings are emotional animals. As time accumulates, they become more and more emotional. Even if they have real ideas, it is impossible to ignore the influence of emotions immediately. Sasuke needs a process, a balance that can balance the rationality and sensibility in his mind. One-way tilting process. Iruka does not intend to ask Sasuke about his specific action plan, because since he has decided to leave tomorrow night, it proves that he is ready for everything. The reason for coming to him is only because he hopes to get real recognition from himself and eliminate the last trace of confusion in his heart. Thinking of this, Iruka stood up suddenly, then took out a scroll with a red cover from his arms, and then held the scroll tightly and stretched out in front of Sasuke. In his puzzled eyes, he said solemnly as if performing some kind of solemn ritual. This is a self-contained practice scroll. The practice method and the enchantment technique needed to be used are all engraved in it. This is the last help I can provide you as a teacher. Let it go. As long as you don't give up halfway, no matter what the result is, you are recognized and the best student. Upon hearing this, Sasuke nodded solemnly. Thank you, Mrs. Iruka. After receiving the scroll with both hands, Sasuke couldn't help but look at Iruka's gaze. Upon seeing it, Iruka couldn't help but stretched out his hand and gently placed it on Sasuke's head. After 1,000 words, it turned into an unprecedented gentle word. Take care of yourself. Yep. Comma 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 comma. No one knew that on this day when there was nothing special, a young man who was about to embark on the path of being an enemy of the entire ninja world had left his enlightenment teacher's home with unshakable determination. Except for a black cat that lays on the sofa from start to finish, with very rich facial expressions and no cat-like appearance. No one noticed that when night fell, when the lights were on, 5 mature young women gathered in a barbecue restaurant to hold the first girls' meeting. Although Izumi, one of the participants, really wants to complain about the girl who is almost 30 in red. Chapter 198 The younger who is about to be enemy with the world. It was said that it was a girls' meeting, but it was actually a celebration of Izumi's success in winning Iruka. As the only adult who can drink, Hong opened up the topic after drinking high and asked about all the changes after I became a lover with Iruka, making her character Hinata, who interprets the two terms, shy, and pure. The faces were red, but the young Sakura and Ino, who were the same age as Hinata, looked very excited, dreaming about the scene of becoming lovers with Sasuke in their minds. As the client, Izumi was not as insecure as a little girl. She confessed that she had completed the handover of the first kiss. If she is the shy little girl like Hinata, Iruka's idiot disease is probably even considered. Become lovers, it is estimated that the intimacy of each other will always stay at the stage of holding hands. Hearing that Izumi is so bold and active, Hinata, Sakura and Ino are all seriously full of admiration as if they are watching idols. Hinata, who has been in a bath with Izumi, has a pair of unusual pupils. After turning around, I don't know what she is thinking. After eating and drinking, Ino and Shao Sakura left with helpless drunken red. Just when Izumi was about to say goodbye to Hinata, Hinata suddenly stopped her. Wait, Sister Izumi. After hearing this, Kwanmi suddenly raised her brows for some reason. Hinata, what do you call me? Seeing the easy-to-understand dissatisfaction on Kwanmei's face, Hinata couldn't help but froze. Fortunately, she was not Naruto's stupid to an incurable level. She quickly reacted and apologized. Sorry, Master. As if she had won some kind of sovereignty, Kwanmei's face instantly relaxed, and a bright smile appeared on her face. Well, that's right, what's the matter? Hinata, that. Hinata's face was a little hesitant. It seemed that what she wanted to say was a little hard to say, but Izumi had a good impression of her, but she didn't have any patience at all. After a while, Hinata suddenly clenched his fists and waved for herself like a cheer. The shaky color on her little face temporarily faded, and then she said, Mother, I want to be a brave person like you, so, anyway, please help me exercise, please. After speaking, Hinata suddenly bent down and bowed deeply to Izumi, with an extremely sincere attitude. What? Izumi looked at the girl in front of her with a bit of astonishment. Although she thought Hinata was a good girl, she actually didn't know her at all, so naturally she didn't know Hinata's troubles. Just take the liberty to ask, you want to be brave because. Izumi was a little cautious, asking in a tone that did not touch Hinata's slender girl's heart. It can't be the bravery of a ninja in combat. After all, as a ninja, it is impossible to have no basic combat literacy. For a girl, the reason for wanting courage so desperately is. I have a person who really cares about, I think. I want him to really notice my existence. Just like Mr. Iruka noticed your presence, Master. After finishing talking, Hinata's pink and jade face quickly filled with a moving blush, which was very cute and made people feel stunned. Together with the female Izumi, I couldn't help but be taken aback. It is probably Iruka and Naruto. This kind of idiot or a cultivator like Sasuke will not have any reaction. That's it, okay, let me try to help you, hehe. A meaningful smile appeared on Kwanmi's face, and then suddenly raised her hand and placed it on Hinata's small head, and said jokingly, the girl who works hard for love is so cute. There is no reason for rejection. In Hinata, Kwanmi saw who she was once, and her familiar sense of sight made her want to help Hinata. If possible, can you tell me the name of the guy you care about? I'm a little bit interested in that lucky guy. Hearing that, Hinata's original blush spread to the roots of her ears in an instant. I don't know if it was an illusion. Kwanmi seemed to see wisps of white steam coming out of her, and she couldn't help but exclaimed in her heart. Advertisement. So cute. The cuteness of this soft girl is simply exploding. After a while, Kwanmi heard Hinata's mosquito-like smashing sound. Yes, it's Naruto. Naruto-kun. Izumi, who was originally feeling that there is such a cute girl in the world, was stunned when she heard the name, and a teenager with yellow hair and an orange suit that was always dying of a turtle appeared in her mind. Huh, are you talking about the hardcore boy Iruka used to like to play tricks on? Quote. Comma. The night was like ink, and even the prosperous Konoha finally plunged into darkness at this time. Sasuke put his hands behind his back, lying on his back on the roof, looking at the endless darkness of the sky like a beast trying to swallow everything. Tomorrow is the beginning of everything, the beginning of ending all causes, ambitions, hatred. Raising his hand and moving his eyes a little, Sasuke's thoughts gradually fell into the memories of cultivating with Naruto and the others over the years, seeing the traces left by his constant efforts on his palms, and his eyes gradually loosened. But at this moment, success to death, drink. Seizing the gap where his thinking was temporarily stagnant, two tall figures who hadn't been in the night suddenly appeared beside him, holding the sword high and slashing at Sasuke below. Ding! A spark flashed in the air, and the sharp dachi slashed on a lavender translucent light curtain that suddenly appeared in front of Sasuke, making a crisp sound. Upon seeing this, the two of them were wearing masks, only a pair of exposed eyes flashed with surprise. This is, what happened? However, the astonishment was only a moment. The two were obviously ninjas with extremely rich combat experience. Although I don't know how Sasuke defended himself against the thunder strike under his concealment technique, they did not hesitate to explode chakra under their feet. Jumped hard behind you. However, Susanoo, Sasuke, who was still lying on his back, suddenly stared. The dark pupils didn't know when they turned into Mangekyo Sharingan, who was able to flash a strange scarlet light in the dark. The next moment, Sasuke's body suddenly exploded. There was a burst of lavender light. Varied. There was no room for surprise. A huge lavender palm was suddenly reflected in the pupils of the two people in midair, full of horror. They got closer and closer. In the end, the distance between each other completely disappeared, and the two people only felt the body. A tight, then their bodies suddenly rang out with a crisp sound of kakaka. The pain instantly disappeared from consciousness. The two instinctively wanted to scream, but they were suddenly caught by an unknown energy that suddenly poured into their bodies. All actions were blocked, and in the end only a dull whimper could be heard. That energy instantly filled their broken bones and joints, poured into the meridians, completely blocking their chakra flow, and then the only trace of consciousness left by the two suddenly felt their bodies loosened, which only crushed the bones of their whole bodies. The huge broken palm seemed to loosen temporarily, but the next moment, they felt their heads clamped, and their bodies swayed softly in midair. In a trance, the bodies of the two of them gradually sank, and their blurred vision finally met a pair of scarlet pupils, and then their consciousness completely dissipated. Chapter 199. A Slight Darkness. It is estimated that the third shift will not be finished until 1 o'clock in the morning. As the lavender giant composed of chakra dissipated, the two figures fell to the ground feebly. Although they still breathed a little, they were not supported by bones and the inexplicable energy confinement in the body. Even if Sasuke relieved Sharingan's illusion, they can't move at all, let alone biting their tongues and committing suicide, they can't even speak. Click. Sasuke rested on the ground with one hand, slowly straightened up, and whispered softly at the same time. Shimura Danzo, the high-level Konoha who gave Itachi the order to slaughter the whole clan. The ink-colored six-pointed star pattern exudes an extremely strange aura in the Scarlet Sharingan. For some reason, Sasuke clearly provided the information he wanted, but Sasuke did not kill the person who attacked him. Crackling. Several arcs suddenly appeared in front of Sasuke's long and narrow bangs, and then under his control, some of the arcs slowly poured into his Mangekyo Sharingan, while the other parts flew to the corpses lying on the ground. Two ninjas rushed into them instantly. The six-pointed star pattern in Mangekyo Sharingan slowly turned, and accompanied by a flash of blue-white light, a strange energy spread rapidly around. In the next moment, Sasuke raised his right hand and formed a convergent seal of chakra, and the left hand is fast to seal with the change of the 5 fingers. When the weird energy connects the energy in the two ninjas lying on the ground, the six-pointed star stops turning, and the one-handed seal is completed, combining the trinity of ninjutsu, pupils and abilities. The secret technique that belongs to Sasuke suddenly starts. Secret technique, Tianyu Ling technique. Click. A crisp sound suddenly sounded from the two ninjas lying on the ground. In the darkness, the eyes of the two gradually disappeared. As this sound spread throughout the body, their eyes were very strange and regained their agility again. Click. The two of them put their hands on the ground at the same time. The next moment they had their bones shattered, they stood up unbelievably, and after flexing their arms a few times, they knelt down and said respectfully. Master Sasuke. Sasuke slowly lowered his hands. Although it was the first time to use this technique, he did not doubt the effect of this technique in the slightest. Take me to the training base of Gen. Yes. The two of them responded without hesitation, and then suddenly used their feet, exploding with the stronger speed before they were dominated by Sasuke, and the several verticals disappeared into the night. After they left, Sasuke suddenly took out 2 scrolls from his arms. After opening one of them, there was a conspicuous Fei in the center of the scroll surrounded by countless ink-printed characters. Character. After seeing the conspicuous word, Fei, Sasuke immediately bit his thumb, then opened another scroll, threw it in the air, and swiped his blood-stained thumb on the scroll with the conspicuous breath. At the same time with the other hand, summoning came out, and the dream ninja that Zanyu gave him that could cut through the space scarlet front was lifted up. The blood-stained thumb was against the blood-red sword body, and the next moment, the ink-colored text on the breath scroll seemed to be alive, rushing into the scarlet front through Sasuke's hand. When the scroll became blank, Sasuke suddenly stabbed the scarlet edge to the ground, and then quickly sealed the seal with both hands. As chakra poured into the sword, the ninjutsu that originally belonged to Crescent Moon suddenly launched. Advertisement. Feiyin. Summoning technique. Boom boom boom. 4 figures of 2 men, 2 women, accompanied by a burst of white smoke, appeared next to Sasuke out of thin air. They were originally ordered to meet Sasuke tomorrow outside the village. By Juyu and Thunder Teeth, they are all 4. It is a member of an organization called Shi, founded by Xuanyu, but after Xuanyu retired, Sasuke showed his qualifications as a leader, and they have now accepted the reality of Sasuke becoming the new leader. It seemed that he didn't expect that he would be suddenly summoning out, and the expressions of the 4 of them were a little surprised. Chief, didn't you mean that genius started to act? Without cutting the dissatisfied road, Bai on the side did not show dissatisfaction, but he was yawning while rubbing his eyes to dissipate sleepiness while wearing a pajamas. Obviously it was not the right time to be called. For some reason Lei Ya looked like a loyal servant who would obey even if Sasuke gave him any orders. Although Juyu was a little dissatisfied at first, she suddenly looked like a hungry wolf when she saw Bai in pajamas. The prey usually slobbered. Sasuke ignored their emotions, picked up another scarlet edge and placed it behind his waist, and said lightly. The plan has changed. Before embarking on that road, I would like to stand in the position of the Uchiha clan for the last time, but I had a long-cherished wish. As he said, several blue and white arcs flashed under Sasuke's feet. Follow me. Click. The rubble under Sasuke's feet shattered in an instant, and his figure suddenly turned into a white streamer, which appeared more than 10 meters away in the blink of an eye. In the outskirts of Konoha, a secret base that only Konoha knows about is hidden under the ground. The surface is protected by several layers of powerful enchantments. One eye is covered with a bandage, and one cane is on his chin. The old man with crossed scars suddenly stood up, raised his head, and looked at the gray moonlight in the sky through the twisted air barrier. His squinted eyes suddenly opened, and a sharp cold light flashed. Master Danzo, what's the matter? A man wearing a dark ninja costume and a bat-shaped mask on his head asked softly. Hearing what he said, Danzo hadn't spoken yet. The one standing on the other side had a single ponytail tied with an orange. The dark-haired man suddenly said. Ichimoku and Jilling are back. Judging from the nature of chakra, there seems to be no problem. Danzo did not speak, but the dignified look on his face did not relax in the slightest with the confirmation of his subordinates. After a while, with the shaking of the candlestick, 2 men with masks on their faces walked in at the same time, walked up to Danzo, and then half-kneeled on the ground. I'm very sorry, Lord Danzo, the mission to assassinate Uchiha Sasuke. One of the men's face seemed a bit unwilling and self-blaming, but before he could finish his words, Danzo's exposed eyes suddenly condensed, and then suddenly aroused in the puzzled gaze of the 2 subordinates behind him, and suddenly pulled out one of his subordinates. Short sword. Pouch, pouch. The sound of sharp blades entering the flesh, not far away, on the wall illuminated by candlelight, the shadows of the 2 people who were half kneeling on the ground suddenly swayed. The next moment, only a black shadow fell, and suddenly sputtered out of the disconnected place. There were countless black shadows, and then only a click sound was heard, and the wall was instantly stained with a sorrowful blood red. Chapter 200 Scarlet Seal's Edge. Although the flow of chakra is not abnormal, it does not seem to be illusion, but in this world, the way to control a person is not only illusion. Uchiha Sasuke is the student that the guy has cultivated the most, plus the uncertainty of Mangekyo Sharingan's ability. S**X, even if you don't directly change a person's personality through illusion, it's nothing strange. Danzo lifted the blood-stained knife, glanced down at the 2 headless corpses underneath, and handed the sword to Yamanaka behind him. He lifted his foot and stepped across the blood-stained ground. While walking, he unlocked his right hand bandage, revealing the right hand sealed by the metal seal ninja. I can easily see through the assassinations of Ikaim and sealing by Grandmaster assassinating technique, and in turn control them. Uchiha Sasuke's strength may have far exceeded my expectations. It seems that if you want to take him down, you must act real. Quote. Hearing that, Yamanaka Kase and Aburame could not help but be stunned. Ichimoku and stabbing were the ninjas in the roots that Grandmaster assassinated technique. Uchiha Sasuke was only a 13-year-old boy. Originally, they thought Danzo had sent this to assassinate a teenager. The 2 made a lot of fuss in the past, but they didn't expect this to be the result. Danzo suddenly took action on Sasuke because Sasuke's recent whereabouts were too weird, and all these changes started when Uchiha Crescent Moon contacted him. Therefore, he guessed that Crescent Moon had already told Sasuke the truth about Uchiha's extermination. Provoked Sasuke's resentment towards Konoha. After all, after a nominal battle with 3rd generation against Orochimaru, Uchiha Xuanyu lost all his power for some reason, and even the basic chakra refinement was impossible. The ninjas in the village believed that this was Orochimaru's use of unknown vicious ninjutsu. But Danzo knew that there must be something hidden in it, but no matter what happened on the roof at that time, the result was that Uchiha Crescent Moon became a completely ordinary person, so if Crescent Moon wanted to avenge him, it can only rely on the power of Uchiha Sasuke. According to this line of thinking, the reasons for Sasuke's recent abnormalities are clear, and he has a reason to kill Sasuke. That's right, even if the master holds Gen in his hand, Danzo must also worry about Iruka's attitude, just because Iruka's strength is too strong. He once secretly sent more than 10 elites of Root to besiege the bandits. Iruka, who was a C-level mission, only one person escaped. He died after telling the battle situation at the time. He didn't escape, but Iruka was deliberately released in order to give Danzo, the leader of the Roots, a warning. After hearing that the battle was completely unilateral, Danzo dismissed his thoughts on Iruka. It's not that he is afraid of Iruka, but that there is no need to fight him to death. After all, Iruka has not shown any ambitions towards the village's senior leaders and Hokage, and there is no sign of betraying Konoha. Danzo thought about it for a long time. In the end, I felt that I didn't need to care about a guy with no ambitions, so he chose a laissez-faire attitude towards Iruka, the extremely special Chunin, just like the old man of third generation. The only difference is that third generation takes the initiative, and he was deterred by Iruka. Passive. Due to concerns about whether it will touch Iruka's bottom line, and third generation's gradual alienation of him after Uchiha's genocide, Danzo has lived very low-key these years, basically fading out of Konoha's circle of power and only acting in the dark. However, after realizing that Sasuke probably already knew the truth, he had to take action, and now that Sasuke's betrayal of Konoha was basically determined, Iruka, who was Konoha's last barrier, lost the position of protecting Sasuke. Halfway through, Danzo stopped abruptly, then suddenly turned his head, winking at the two behind him. The communication between ninjas often does not require language. A look, a gesture and other hints are far more convenient than words. Yamanaka Fung understood Danzo's wink in an instant, stepped back 2 steps, and slowly raised his hand. Quickly seal with both hands. On the other side, Aburame took the route and appeared in front of Danzo, watching the entrance not far away warily. Advertisement. Hey, has Bing Yin technique been seen through? In the clearing where there was nothing, a low and rude voice suddenly sounded. The next moment, only a few continuous, clanging sounds were heard, the air seemed to be cut off, and the picture suddenly changed, with an indifferent expression. Headed by Sasuke, 4 differently dressed ninjas appeared in front of Danzo out of thin air. Being able to see through the perfect refracted light of the special ice wall made by Ice Dun, it seems that the guys here are not the general ones. Holding a long whip in her hand, Juyu suddenly stretched out her pink tongue and licked her lips, her charming face was full of evil charm. Sasuke held a blood-red dagger in both hands, as if he hadn't heard Juzuki's words, and his scarlet pupils stared straight at Danzo, who was removing the metal seal on his right hand. At this moment, dozens of figures suddenly appeared on the stone wall above everyone, and then only a few swishes were heard, and countless flashing black lights instantly covered all directions. Upon seeing this, Bai's face instantly condensed, and his hands quickly formed seals. At the same time, chakra refined to the limit in one breath, and finally suddenly shouted. The secret technique of ice escape, the ice-cracked firmament. Click. Suddenly, there were huge noises around the crowd. The next moment, everyone's feet suddenly turned white, and then more than a dozen huge ice cones suddenly rose from the ground and pierced towards the sky. Then all the huge ice cones, the tips converged at one point at the same time, forming a huge ice cone nearly 10 meters high, completely protecting the Sasuke and others inside. Ding ding ding. A continuous series of crisp sounds, a black torrent composed of kunai and shuriken quickly gathered at the 3 of them, and hit the surface of the ice cone, but only left a shallow mark on it, and it fell weakly. On the ground. The ice-cracked sky was originally an offensive technique. It was used to attack enemies or ninjutsu that might attack from above. The defense itself was not very strong. Fortunately, the power of shuriken throwing was not strong, so that it could be used to attack it. Defense. If it weren't for her strongest offensive and defensive ninjutsu, the magic mirror ice crystal was activated for too long, she would not use an attack ninjutsu to defend. Ice done. So that's it, Mist Shinobi's rebellious ninja, Uchiha Sasuke, you dare to stand beside an enemy rebellious ninja innocently. It seems that you are determined to betray Konoha. Danzo squinted his eyes and didn't care at all about the strength that Bai showed. At this time, in his eyes, only the Sasuke system with a pair of Mangekyo Sharingan with unknown abilities is worthy of attention, and the others are nothing but miscellaneous soldiers to him. Chapter 201 Ice Cracked Sky. Bang bang bang. The metal used to seal his right hand fell on the ground. Danzo's face was still unhappy, and he slowly removed the bandage on his hand. Dozens of ninjas on the rock saw that the throwing was invalid, and they stopped their actions immediately. Then several ninjas drew out the swords behind them, leapt down without hesitation, and slashed directly in midair. Vacuum sword. The chakra sword chi with the wind nature transformation slammed into the huge ice cone. Amidst the sound of kakaka, the ice cone broke apart and turned into large and small ice cubes and fell on the ground. However, through the gap between the falling ice cubes, all you can see is that a tall man with a decapitating knife on his back is holding a simple preparatory movement with one hand. Ninfa, Mist Shinobi technique. Containing chakra, the extremely low visibility fog suddenly spread to the surroundings without cutting it again, and several Grandmaster Swordsman ninjas who fell in midair were shocked. They did not dare to dive further, and pierced the back of the rock wall with the sword. Gathering chakra on the soles of the feet, standing steadily on the rock wall, watching the white mist underneath with a vigilant look. If you don't cut into the fog, a lot of chakra is injected into the fog. The thick fog that does not distinguish between the enemy and the enemy has blocked everyone's sight. Even Sasuke, who owns Sharingan, cannot use Sharingan's super insight ability in this situation. Maybe only Byakugan can move freely in such a fog by relying on his sight. What? Just when a group of ninjas who are good at wind style were preparing to use ninjutsu to blow away the dense fog, a scream suddenly sounded on the rock wall, and then only a puff sound of a heavy object landing, a scream it stopped abruptly, and a fresh life disappeared. Hearing this voice, everyone's minds trembled immediately, but before they had finished their seals, Bai and Leia put their hands together in the thick fog. Lightning style, thunder, ice escape secret technique, 1000 chance kill. Countless ice and bonds and blue and white electric currents containing violent energy flew towards the ninjas on the rock wall. The next moment, accompanied by a series of screams, all the ninjas who stayed on the rock wall after breaking through the cone of ice fell and smashed. There was a dull sound on the ground. The thick fog was finally blown away by everyone using wind style together, and Danzo's right hand finally appeared in front of everyone. When I saw the right hand with a grayish-white skin that was different from ordinary people, Sasuke's pupils, who had originally looked indifferent, shrank suddenly, and saw that in Danzo's raised right hand, a full 10-3 Go Jade Sharingan was embedded in it like a gem, exuding a very strange aura while turning back and forth. Tisk Tusk, one of the two giants of Konoha, the once brilliant Uchiha clan, actually ended up like this in the end. Without cutting the corner of his mouth, a thick mocking color appeared on his sullen face. After Sasuke recovered, his face suddenly condensed, and the next moment, accompanied by a very noisy, cracking sound, countless blue and white arcs suddenly appeared, constantly surrounding Sasuke's body. Thunder body technique. Sasuke, bathed in thunder light, suddenly rose, his narrow bangs swayed back and forth, scarlet pupils showed an extremely cold aura, and the bloody scarlet blade in his hand seemed to be echoing the master's heart, shaking restlessly. Those trash fish will be handed over to you. After the words fell, before the four of them responded, Sasuke's figure suddenly turned into a streamer, and rushed towards Danzo at a very fast speed. He came to him in a moment, and the scarlet edge in his hand flashed a dazzling red light towards Danzo. Pierced in his chest. Ding! There was a crisp metal strike, and the two scarlet fronts were blocked by Yamanaka Kase and Aburame at the same time. At the same time, Danzo suddenly bulged his cheeks, gathered the air and chakra, and quickly spit out. Advertisement. Wind style, vacuum wave. An extremely sharp straight line wind blade flew towards Sasuke's front door. At a very close distance, the wind blade that is hard to detect the attack trajectory for ordinary ninjas can't hide, but for Sharingans with super insight. This is not the case for Sasuke. Sasuke's physical skills under thunder technique have been greatly improved. Naturally, there will be no situation where he can see through the enemy's attack but is defeated because his body can't keep up. I saw that he moved his head slightly, the wind blade it passed through the hair beside Sasuke's cheek just a few millimeters away. After avoiding Danzo's attack, the scarlet front in Sasuke's hand suddenly flashed a dazzling red light. The next moment, the blood-red sword body suddenly showed a ring of blood-colored curse marks, and the roots in Aburame and the Yamanaka wind had not yet been taken. When he reacted, he passed through their arms and plunged straight into their bodies. But this didn't seem to be an offensive technique. After the bloody curse entered their bodies, they didn't feel anything strange in their bodies. However, with their rich ninja experience, they naturally wouldn't think that it was just a simple blind eye technique. Seeing the scarlet curse had penetrated into their bodies, Sasuke immediately withdrew his hand and turned over quickly a few times before Danzo used the next operation, and distanced them from them in a moment. Damn it, what did that guy do to us? Master Danzo, what was that technique just now? Danzo shook his head. Although he knew that the two scarlet daggers in Sasuke's hand were Uchiha's famous swords, he had no information about the abilities of those two swords. Because, almost all the people who have seen the ability of the short swords have become the stepping stones on the road to Crescent Moon fame. Sasuke, who retreated temporarily, didn't rush to attack, but suddenly bit one of the scarlet edge with his mouth, then put his hands together, sandwiched the other scarlet edge, and quickly closed the seal at the same time. Upon seeing this, Yamanaka Fung and Aburame took roots and had an extremely strong ominous premonition from the depths of their hearts. Danzo, who has been a ninja for more than 50 years and has extremely rich combat experience, immediately ordered without hesitation. Hurry up and stop him, never let him complete that technique. Although I don't know what the effect of the technique Sasuke is trying to launch, the battle between ninjas is not a point to stop contest. Curiosity is the most important thing in the battlefield of ninjas, because it is very possible that the moment the enemy turns out his cards, it is the moment of life and death. Yes, Aburame took the root and Yamanaka Wind responded loudly at the same time. After taking a tacit look at each other, Aburame took the root and suddenly took off his gloves, and then chakra burst out from under his feet, rushed towards Sasuke, and suddenly jumped high when he was about to approach Sasuke. He slammed down at Sasuke with his bare hands. And at the moment he leapt high, the figure of Yamanaka Kase who had been following behind him suddenly appeared in front of Sasuke. When the last mark was completed, ninjutsu suddenly launched towards Sasuke. Forbearance, heart-to-heart technique. Pure spiritual energy rushed towards Sasuke, and at the same time, the weird dark purple fist that Aburame took root also appeared not far above Sasuke's head. However, Sasuke's face remained unchanged when facing the attack between the two, and it still seemed as if see through everything indifference. Watching Aburame take the roots and Yamanaka Kase's attack, Commander was ordered to help. At this moment, the Scarlet Edge, who was tightly gripped by Sasuke, suddenly made a click. The next moment, Sasuke's body suddenly broke out. There was a dazzling crimson light, and at the same time, the bloody curse imprints that had been buried in the roots of Yamanaka Wind and Aburame suddenly appeared, and then echoed the red light, gradually turning into crimson. Feiyin, squeeze out. Bang bang. The movements of the two suddenly stopped, as if someone had pressed the pause button. The next moment, as the crimson curse that emerged from their abdomens suddenly flashed, they suddenly felt a huge force coming, and their bodies could not be controlled. The resident flew out backwards, smashed hard on the rock wall, and was deeply embedded a few feet before he could stop. Sasuke released the hands that had been folded in order to gather chakra, and then took the scarlet edge from his mouth. He couldn't look at the two people struggling to break away from the rock wall. He raised his hands and slammed to his side. Evolved from that crimson light, it was pierced by the crimson curse imprint that was exactly the same shape as the ring curse imprint that was buried in Aburame roots and Yamanaka wind. Scarlet Seal, Break Evil. Chapter 202 Scarlet Seal Technique. Pouch. The sound of the sharp blade pierced into the flesh sounded, and Aburame, who finally broke free from the rock wall and stood up, shrank at the same time as Yamanaka Keisa's pupils. With a face full of disbelief, he lowered his head and looked at the blood-red dagger through his chest. How is it possible? The heart was pierced, and the strength faded like a tide. When Sasuke suddenly drew the dagger in the crimson curse that pierced in front of him, the daggers on their chests disappeared in front of them with Sasuke's movements, and at the same time, the crimson curse behind them disappeared into the air. Obviously, the crimson curse can make Scarlet Edge cut through the space and kill it silently at a location that the target can't see. This is just the most basic ability of Scarlet Edge. Puff. Aburame took the root and Yamanaka fell weakly in a pool of blood, and after a while, there was no sound. Danzo turned his head and looked at the terrifying blood hole on their back inexplicably. Danzo. The scarlet edge in his hand flashed a red brilliance. The next moment, the scarlet seal that had been locked on the target gradually disappeared into the air. Sasuke raised his head, a pair of extremely cold eyes staring at Danzo. I use your life to put an end to my obsession. Crackling. The blue and white arc surrounding Sasuke's body suddenly made a louder noise than before, as if 1,000 birds were calling at the same time, sharply and sharply, obviously intensified. Many of the blue and white arcs suddenly separated and poured into Sasuke's body. For a moment, I saw Sasuke's hair and beard, and the whole person's momentum rose again. Secret technique, Thunder Body Technique second stage. Ha! A blue-white light cut through the space and flew away faster than Danzo at a speed invisible to the naked eye. So fast. Danzo only had time to flash a thought. The next moment, the scarlet edge that suddenly appeared in Sasuke's hands behind him turned into a blood-red cold light, and it pierced Danzo's neck without hesitation. The blood-red sword pierced Danzo's neck instantly and emerged from his throat. Then Sasuke pulled it horizontally. With a poof, Danzo's neck was splashed with blood and even screamed. Without sending out, he fell to the ground. Click. There was a crisp sound in the darkness. When the hazy moonlight shone in, I saw a girl with black waist-length hair and a lavender silk nightdress with a high degree of transparency. With an iron wire inserted into the keyhole of the door. After a while, only a click was heard, the door lock was opened, and a smug smile appeared on the girl's delicate face, but when she opened the door and walked in lightly. Snapped. With a soft sound, the darkness in the house was instantly dissipated by the soft light. The girl was shocked. Before she could react, she heard a familiar ridicule. Yo, good evening, Kwanmei. Izumi turned her head and saw Iruka, who was leaning on the bed with her back on her chest, looking at her with a smile but a smile. The next moment, the girl's face couldn't help but become embarrassed. Iruka, why haven't you slept so late? Did you have insomnia? Advertisement. Since becoming a couple officially, Izumi never added the suffix, teacher, when she was called Iruka, and used a trivial way to narrow the distance between the two, but Iruka didn't even notice it. Don't worry, the quality of my sleep has always been too good, so someone always comes in at night while I'm asleep. When Iruka said this, Izumi's face flushed ashamedly. I didn't have my hand. I also have integrity. Now that's the matter, you still tell me this. Iruka flipped through Byakugan, you count the number of times you attacked me at night, and don't talk about sleepwalking with me. I haven't seen it when I grow up. Whoever sleepwalks can pry other people's room locks skillfully. This. Izumi hesitated, and Iruka shrugged as soon as I saw this. The feeling of being suppressed because of Izumi's recent initiative finally eased a lot. Iruka walked up to Izumi, stretched out her hand in her awkward eyes, and put her hand on her small shoulder. Seeing this, Izumi suddenly showed a look of expectation. However, the girl's expectation lasted only 1 second. Okay, let's forget it this time, but let's not take it as an example, go back to sleep. Iruka's hands pressed slightly to make Izumi turn around, and then gently pushed her towards the door. To be honest, he is now fighting with eyelids and is so sleepy, although I expected Izumi will definitely attack at night, but he didn't. Thinking that it would be so late, if Izumi was 5 minutes late, Iruka would definitely not be able to hold it back to sleep, and then the next day she opened her eyes and saw the girl's head, smelling the girl's body scent to dispel sleepiness. He hasn't done a good job of accepting that kind of daily consciousness. After all, he doesn't even have the consciousness of love. He just had a lover so inexplicably, and he was still 4 years younger than himself. It's weird to get used to it. Just as Iruka was about to push Izumi outside the door, she suddenly felt resistance. And many more. Izumi turned around, flexibly got rid of Iruka's push, walked directly to the bed and sat down. Although I was found, it doesn't mean I have to give up. Oh, I don't hold Iruka right now. I can't sleep even when I go to bed, and you can't bear to make me sleepless, and then I have dark circles under my eyes the next day to make people laugh at jokes, right? Stop talking nonsense. Iruka curled her lips. Why haven't you seen this problem before? And even if you draw ABCH on your face, no one in Konoha would dare to laugh. Don't think I don't know, you are. Carrying that the most violent female ninja Konoha can't provoke, this notorious bully girl, who dares to provoke you? Who, which B asterisk 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 D dared to give me this nickname? Is it Kakashi or Ebisu? Why do you think of them right away? Iruka rubbed his temples with a headache. I don't know why Izumi always doesn't wait to see Kakashi and Ebisu, two of my best friends. Kakashi is better. Izumi will keep the most basic when facing him. Polite, but Izumi's attitude towards Ebisu is very obvious. Even if he is aside, Izumi always looks at Ebisu with a look of rubbish. In the past, he even advised him not to get entangled with Ebisu, saying that he would be contaminated and become very disgusting. Forget it, this kind of thing is fine, compared to this, you go back to sleep quickly, I'm almost sleepy. As he said, Iruka yawned, and his rather dark scar face was full of haziness. So you hurry up and turn off the lights. Really, we are already lovers. What else can we avoid? Kwanmei patted the edge of the bed and said naturally. Sooner or later you have to get used to this kind of thing. It's not reasonable to explain that you are lovers and live together, but sleep separately. Isn't I inferior to those filthy books? Hearing this, Iruka suddenly twitched the corner of his mouth. I didn't expect Kwanmei to be so arrogant after she discovered the night attack, and what he said made him feel a little unable to refute. Chapter 203 Night Attack. Iruka walked toward Izumi, but didn't turn off the lights. Obviously he didn't follow Izumi's plan. It will be a few more years to sleep in the same bed and wait for you to become an adult. It's too early. With that said, Iruka stretched out her hand, trying to hold Izumi's arm, but Izumi pulled the quilt to cover her whole body, only her head was exposed, and she looked at Iruka with an unconvinced expression. It's not early, keep separating. What kind of love is sleeping? And I'm 18 years old. Why don't I look like an adult? Although I'm not as hot as Sister Schwanyu, I don't look like a little girl. Hearing Izumi mentions Crescent Moon, Iruka's face suddenly smiled bitterly for some reason. She swallowed it back when she wanted to continue to persuade Izumi to leave, and then bent down, and then put the quilt in Izumi's puzzled eyes. She hugged. When you reach the age to drink, you can say that you are an adult. Iruka said, holding Izumi to the door, the quilt was given to you. Didn't you say that you can't sleep without holding me? This quilt, if there is my taste, you will just lay it down and sleep with the quilt as if I was holding it. Don't worry, I won't mind. Hey, wait for me. Izumi, who was wrapped in the quilt, interrupted Iruka's words eagerly. Iruka, do you treat me as as asterisk asterisk T? Even a lover wouldn't do that kind of thing. Bar. It feels quite normal. Iruka, who was walking towards her room while holding Izumi to the living room, said naturally. All day long, I smelled the handkerchief that Yuko's photo idol gave him. Oh, when I remembered, Kakashi said it was fetishism. Decided, go and kill them tomorrow. Hearing this, Iruka suddenly twitched at the corner of his mouth, and a look of conspiracy appeared on Scar's face. Just when Izumi was calculating in her heart how to knock Kakashi sap tomorrow, and by the way to teach that sullen and filthy man who was likely to spoil Iruka. Boom boom boom. Accompanied by the blue and white light that flashed suddenly, loud noises that shook the sky suddenly came from afar. Iruka couldn't help but stop her movements, turned her head, and looked out the window. Huh, thunder. Is it going to rain outside? Such a large movement is completely unlike the effect of lightning-style ninjutsu. In Izumi's view, it can only be caused by the power of heaven and earth that seems to directly bombard the human soul, making it instinctively produce an irresistible feeling. This effect. However, Iruka shook his head, it's impossible to rain or thunder in this weather. This thunder is man-made. With that said, Iruka suddenly put down Izumi and walked to the window. At this moment, several extremely strong blue and white rays appeared again in the distance. In a flash, Konoha was shaken like a day. When the thunder light flashed, there was another burst of light. There was a huge sound that resounded through the world. Boom. The light of thunder illuminates Iruka's profile, and it also makes Izumi notice Iruka's rather solemn look. Love makes people stupid. This law is vividly and exquisitely reflected in Izumi. When Iruka is next to her, all she thinks about Iruka is about Iruka. Even if she is not next to him, she will often think of him. Therefore, this is obvious. It was not a normal thunder, but as an elite Jonin, she didn't notice it. But she didn't notice it doesn't mean that others didn't notice either. Whoosh whoosh. Under the gray moonlight, several agile figures suddenly appeared in Iruka's line of sight. During a few jumps with strength, the figure quickly ran towards the place where the noise was made outside the village. Advertisement. Relying on the perception of the force field, Iruka instantly judged their approximate strength. Among them, there was a micro force field that he felt quite familiar. After a little thought, he recalled the identity of the owner of the micro force field. Bayunye Mountain. Iruka groaned for a moment, and the face of a man with a scar on his right lip, tied with a ponytail, and a serious and determined face appeared in his mind. Konoha's more active elite Jonin is just a few, and each is very easy to recognize, whether it is a cool man with silver hair and a mask, Hitaki Kakashi, or Uchiha, the first rookie who has always shown an iceberg beauty in front of outsiders. Izumi, or the blue beast might guy, who is easy to give people the feeling of, is this something wrong? He is a very distinctive person in appearance and personality. The same is true for Bayunye Mountain. It can be seen at a glance that he is not a character like passerby. In addition, he is a master of swordsmanship like Izumi. Therefore, although Iruka has not spoken to him a few times, he is still impressed. Iruka, do you mean an enemy attacked the village? Izumi did not notice that Iruka stayed for 2 seconds on a figure who was rushing not far away, and when she walked next to Iruka, a serious look appeared on her face. When it's time to work, you have to work. As a member of Konoha, especially as an elite Jonin, it is naturally impossible for her to turn a blind eye when the enemy invades the village. Iruka shook his head. That is Sasuke's lightning-style secret technique. I can perceive his unique personal reality in the thunder and lightning. Sasuke, how could he use such a powerful lightning style? Izumi said in surprise. Iruka nodded, and then suddenly asked, now, Izumi, who is stronger than Bayunye Mountain? Uncle Yeshin. The inexplicable question made Izumi quite confused, but even though she couldn't understand why Iruka asked this, she answered honestly. I should be a little better than him, but the rounds of combat experience, I definitely can't match him, so I can win in general competitions, but if I fight for life and death, I only have a 70% chance of winning. That's it. Iruka squeezed his chin, thought for a while, then hesitated, and finally nodded determinedly. Bayunishin is rushing to the place where Sasuke made a move with a few Jonin, although I don't know what Sasuke is doing there, but his actions are not suitable for the people in the village to know for the time being. I will tell you the reason. You will help me stop them now. It doesn't take too long, just 5 minutes. As he said, Iruka paused suddenly, and then said rather inexplicably, can it be done? If you ask this question, Naruto's second stunner, he might immediately jump into a thunder, and then point to Iruka's nose and shout loudly, saying that Iruka doesn't believe in his power and must make Iruka regret asking this question. Of course, it will inexplicably evolve into the result of Naruto being slapped by Iruka again, graffiti on his face and belly, and then he walks around the village more than a dozen laps upside down. However, Kwanmei was stunned when she heard this. The next moment, she didn't know what she thought of. A heart-catching smile suddenly appeared on her delicate face, and she said with a sweet smile. Who do you think you are asking? I am your lover. As long as it is your order, no matter what it is, I will definitely be able to complete it. Even if I am not strong enough, love will fill that part of it. When the words were over, Izumi gave Iruka a meaningful look, then turned around and walked towards the room where the ninja was placed, leaving Iruka with a mysterious back. For others, Iruka's problem is naturally a distrust of their strength, but for Izumi it makes her feel warm and caring. Chapter 204 Bayunye Mountain. Wind Style, Infinite Vacuum Sphere. Danzo's mouth quickly spit out countless penetrating wind blades, as if a machine gun was shooting. Sasuke flew away from a short distance, and his face was a little weak. Just after the thunder body technique was lifted, when the body's function had not been restored, he could not avoid it at all, and could only forcefully defend it. So Sasuke's eyes condensed, and he resisted the discomfort of the body, and activated the pupil removal technique regardless of the damage. Susanoo. With the activation of the pupil technique, a burst of intense lavender light suddenly burst out around Sasuke's body, almost instantly forming a rib-shaped translucent light curtain, shielding Sasuke in the middle. Boom boom boom. Dozens of wind blades that can easily penetrate the steel plate hit the translucent light curtain, making a series of crisp noises, but they could only leave a ripple on the light curtain, without hurting Sasuke inside the light curtain. After resisting Danzo's attack, Sasuke suddenly appeared in front of 2 crimson ring curse marks. At the same time, 2 identical scarlet marks appeared on the back of Danzo's head and heart, and then Sasuke was holding the scarlet marks. Zifeng, without hesitation, pierced towards Scarlet Seal. Feiyan, break the evil. Pouch. Accompanied by a flash of dazzling red light, Danzo's back of his head and heart were pierced at the same time, and his body fell weakly in a pool of blood under the splash of blood. The blood can flow out, which proves that it is not an entity clone like shadow clone technique, which means that it is Danzo himself who fell on the ground, and the back of the brain and the heart are penetrated at the same time, and the average person is absolutely dead, but Sasuke has not relieved the damage to his body. Susanoo, who was extremely burdened, looked at Danzo's body with a solemn expression. As if confirming Sasuke's guess, Danzo's body suddenly became illusory and disappeared into the air in a moment. The next moment, Sasuke suddenly heard Danzo coming from behind, who was calm, as if he hadn't looked at him at all. Voice inside. Don't waste your effort, it's useless. Sasuke slowly turned around and looked at Danzo, who was stepping on the rock wall and lying in the air. However, Danzo noticed that Sasuke's left eye was closed. This feeling is. As Danzo murmured, Sasuke's closed 6-pointed star Mangekyo suddenly opened, and the focus of his eyes instantly focused on Danzo. Accompanied by a scream of blood and tears, the pupil technique that consumes his pupils suddenly activated. Amaterasu. Shattering. A black flame suddenly appeared on Danzo. In the burning of the flames, Danzo's face was distorted and looked extremely painful, but did not disappear at the moment of being attacked. Obviously, this was him himself and not a clone. When Amaterasu's black inflammation disappeared into the air, Danzo was burnt without accident, but... Advertisement. Amaterasu. I haven't seen it for a long time. As expected, Itachi's younger brother, even his eyes are so similar. Unscathed Danzo appeared behind Sasuke again, his expression still calm, but what your eyes see and what you understand are completely different from Itachi. Susanoo quickly relieved, and Sasuke clutched his sore left eye, his already heavy breathing became more rapid, as if he would fall when the wind blows. Continuous use of ultra-high load thunder body technique, large-scale and extremely destructive lightning-style secret technique, scarlet technique that cuts through space, continuous Susanoo, and Amaterasu that causes a great burden on the eyes. No matter which one as it consumes chakras moves very much, and there is even a technique that hurts the enemy 1800. Sasuke's current chakra has less than 2 achievements. Although Danzo's offensive ability is not very strong, Sasuke can't help him with his near-invincible ability. Although Sasuke noticed that over time, the Sharingan on Danzo's right hand has closed for at this time. Obviously he is invincible. His ability also comes at a price. It is possible that when all 10 Sharingan are closed, his invincibility will be lifted, but even if he notices this, he cannot be converted into a chance to win. This battle has turned into a war of attrition. Sasuke consumes physical strength, while Danzo consumes Sharingan, which he scraped from the corpse of the Uchiha clan. The result is obvious. Danzo's Sharingan still has more than half, but Sasuke's physical strength has bottomed out. After all, he is only 13 years old, and his current physical strength simply cannot support a long war of attrition. So how about not using those powerful but expensive killer moves? Obviously, it won't work, because if you don't use killer moves, a pure ninja fight against Sasuke simply cannot be the opponent of Danzo, who has decades of ninja career and extremely rich combat experience, and Danzo can also disarm the invincible. Ninjutsu becomes no consumption. Although the members of Shi defeated the dozens of Anbu on the rock wall with fewer victory, but the main battlefield between Sasuke and Danzo, Sasuke fell behind, and the situation gradually developed in an unfavorable direction. Although he still awakened after turning on Mangekyo Sharingan. In addition to the Amaterasu in the left eye, the ability in the right eye without a master. And the Susanoo in the 2 eyes, the fourth ability obtained by combining the pupil power and the spiritual realm was used as the whole card, but before in order to eliminate the control technique on the root member sent by Danzo to assassinate him and control it, he had to use the fourth ability's derivative pupil technique Tianyu Ling technique resulting in insufficient pupil power to use the fourth ability. Therefore, the last chance for a comeback is gone. Sasuke knows this very well and knows that the most correct option is to retreat. He even planned to retreat if Amaterasu could not kill Danzo. But as soon as Danzo mentioned Itachi, he temporarily suppressed his plan to retreat, and then the corner of his mouth suddenly raised slightly, revealing a mocking smile. What did Itachi understand? Huh, self-sacrifice, protect with your own life is the village peaceful. Yes, self-sacrifice, it is the ninja who guards peace in the dark. Many nameless ninjas exist for maintenance. Danzo suddenly opened his squinting eyes and stared at Sasuke's cold scarlet pupils. Itachi, he is one of the best. He wiped out his feelings for the peace of the village and raised his butcher knife to the people. He is almost a perfect ninja, and the only flaw in his almost perfect ninja career is that it is possible to know the truth. You who hate Konoha live. Whoosh. Danzo flicked his hand, and 2 shurikens with black cold light came out of his sleeves and landed on his hands. So, for the village, in order for Itachi to carry through his shindo, you must die here anyway. When the words fell, Danzo's cheeks suddenly bulged. When chakra gathered, he suddenly spit out the air from his mouth. The next moment, the strong wind pressure quickly lifted the dust on the ground, and Danzo's figure was hidden in the dust. Buzzing. 2 sharp sounds suddenly sounded in the dust. The next moment, 2 high-speed rotating black lights flew out of the dust. They were 2 shurikens. However, the chakras of nature transformation were attached to the shurikens. The maintenance of high-speed rotation has become 2 indestructible cutting blades. Upon seeing this, Sasuke did not rush to raise the scarlet front, and then turned slightly to his side when the shuriken flew over, avoided the cutting of the shuriken by a few millimeters, and then moved the shuriken. When he was about to pass him, he suddenly pierced the scarlet edge with great precision and pierced the hole in the middle of the shuriken with extreme precision. Finally, with a strong flick, the 2 powerful shurikens were hidden away not far away. Danzo in the dust flew over. After completing the evasion and counterattack, Sasuke did not directly rush towards Danzo with the shuriken, but stood still and said indifferently. I don't like words about Itachi's way of living. I only know that a village that must be self-sacrificed to sustain it has no future at all. This world where the future is determined by personal feelings has no value. Chapter 205 Self-Sacrifice. Do you deny the entire ninja world? As expected of the student taught by the fellow Iruka, even his ambition is as abnormal as his. Danzo's contemptuous voice came from the smoke. Then, several wind-breaking sounds suddenly sounded, and the wind blade that could completely cover all the directions Sasuke avoided flew towards him. With Sasuke's current state, it is impossible to activate the thunder body technique to avoid it, so Sasuke did not hesitate to concentrate his pupils again, and the lavender light burst out again around his body. Susanoo. Bang bang bang. The powerful wind blade hit Susanoo. Although the chakra light curtain blocked the attack, the continuous momentum was transmitted to Sasuke through Susanoo's absolute defense, and Sasuke could not help but step back a few steps. Wow. Sasuke spit out a mouthful of blood, and his face sank a lot, even Susanoo's light curtain shook. At this time, Sasuke only felt pain in the cells all over his body. The continuous use of Susanoo forcibly caused great damage to the body, especially his eyes. Now he even looks a little blurred. Is it the limit? So, Danzo's figure slowly appeared in the smoke, watching Sasuke half kneeling on the ground as Susanoo disappeared with a cold face. Suddenly he withdrew kunai, leaned forward slightly, and chakra burst out from under his feet, his figure flashed with speed. He appeared in front of Sasuke extremely quickly, and the kumo he was holding pierced towards Sasuke's head. Ended. Seeing that Sasuke, who had a slight flaw due to the sudden pain, was about to die by Danzo's hand, just at this moment. Secret technique, the barrier of the void. Ding. The black kunai seemed to pierce the steel plate, making a crisp sound, and the transparent ripples rippled, like throwing a stone into the water. Upon seeing this, Danzo's face instantly condensed, and then he gave up and continued attacking Sasuke without hesitation. Chakra burst out from under his feet again, and he quickly retreated behind him. Just after he stood firm, a black shadow suddenly slammed in front of Sasuke with a boom. Danzo, when he raised his head and looked past, he saw a figure of a man in pajamas that was very inconsistent with the current atmosphere. Mr. Iruka. Looking at the familiar figure standing in front of him, Sasuke's original indifferent expression suddenly relaxed, and his face was a little sad. Sorry, Mr. Iruka, let you see how unsatisfactory I am. Seeing that Sasuke was okay, Iruka couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Hearing Sasuke's rather disappointed words, he shook his head and said indifferently. It's nothing, don't care. To be honest, I would be surprised if you can get rid of that stuff now. You are a thief if you are old and not dead. He is also a ninja who is the same age as the third generation old man. Now you are of course not his opponent. Regarding Danzo, Iruka really has no good impression. Although the intersection between him and Danzo is not too small, they are not friendly intersections. Danzo has targeted him several times. If it weren't for he was too lazy to care, and he promised third generation to protect Konoha. From the standpoint of being unable to kill the official Konoha Shinobi, it is estimated that Danzo would not even have the opportunity to be a man with his tail between his heads. Therefore, he did not shy away from Danzo when he said this. Hearing Iruka's words, Danzo's face suddenly sank. He looked at Iruka with endless murderous intent. After a while, after hiding all the murderous in his narrowed eyes, he asked Iruka coldly. Iruka, what do you mean? Do you want to protect Uchiha Sasuke? Advertisement. Sasuke's hands on him as a senior Konoha means that he has been defined as rebellious, so there is nothing wrong with Danzo's use of the word protection. However, knowing this, Iruka casts his lips in disdain. I'm covering Sasuke, what can you do to me? You. Facing Iruka's arrogance, Danzo was very angry, but he did not directly attack Iruka. He understood that even in his heyday, he was not necessarily Iruka's opponent, let alone now after a battle with Sasuke. Of course, what he didn't know was that even in his heyday, the strength of Iruka was far different from the current Iruka, and there was no threat to Iruka at all. Iruka, do you know what you are doing? You are condoning criminals. If you still consider yourself a Konoha Shinobi, kill Uchiha Sasuke immediately, or I. Shut up. Iruka shouted coldly, his eyes suddenly become extremely cold, and an extremely powerful aura suddenly swept towards Danzo. The next moment, Danzo, who was directly locked by the aura, felt a sudden cold in his heart, and his whole body was like ice. It trembled slightly like a cave. When will it be your turn to do something, a stinky mouse who can only do little tricks in the dark? You don't know what to do, let me die. When the words fell, Iruka suddenly waved his hand hard. The next moment, Danzo suddenly felt as if someone had been hit by a heavy hammer in his chest. He could not control his body and flew towards the back, slammed hard on the rock wall, and hit it directly. A big hole, the whole body is buried in. Boom boom boom. Dozens of falling rocks fell and completely blocked the opening of the big hole where Danzo was in a moment. After doing all this, Iruka snorted disdainfully, trash, do you really think I dare not move you? If it was Iruka, who didn't care about many things before, he would naturally not look down on Danzo. As long as Danzo didn't overdo it, he would not bother to pay attention to it. But after becoming a lover with Izumi, his emotions are much richer now, how can he could Danzo poop and pee on his head? Although you can't really kill Danzo, it's okay to teach him a lesson. However, just when Iruka thought that Danzo was stuck in the rock wall and couldn't move, he suddenly sensed that Danzo's micro force field appeared behind him in the field of force field perception. When he turned his head and looked over, he saw Danzo standing not far away unscathed. It shouldn't be Shadow Clone that was hit just now, what's the matter? Sasuke finally recovered from the weak state caused by continuous use of Susanoo. Although his eyes were still very sore and his vision was blurry, his words did not make him feel difficult. Hearing Iruka's puzzled whisper, he immediately fought against Danzo. The information obtained was spoken out. Mr. Iruka, that guy used Sharingan's power to save him from death. No matter what kind of attack he can't kill him in a short time. Hearing this, Iruka immediately glanced at Danzo's right hand, which had a different skin color from that of a normal person. At this time, Sharingan on the back of Danzo's hand seemed to confirm Sasuke's words and just closed. Sharingan, really magical eyes, even this kind of thing can be done, saying that Kwanmi was saved because of the power of those eyes. Faced with such an incredible ability, Iruka was just a little surprised, without the slightest expression of tension on his face. For him who can control the creation of space-time wormholes with a force field, the ability of immortality is the least threatening, isn't it immune to death? Then don't kill him, just throw it into the gap of time and space and let him fend for himself. After a while, Iruka seemed to think of something suddenly, and the corners of his mouth raised slightly, revealing a malicious smile. Hey, that is to say, that guy will be resurrected in full no matter how much he hits, right? Although wondering why Iruka asked this, Sasuke nodded without hesitation and gave Iruka a clear answer. Perfect, it's so perfect. Iruka's eyes gradually showed excitement. This is the first time I have seen such a perfect sandbag. It is perfect for testing new strength. Quote. Chapter 206 The Perfect Sandbag. Konoha is destined to be unstable this year. First, Orochimaru, one of Sanin's rebels, launched the Konoha collapse plan. The village suffered a certain degree of damage under the joint attack of Otonin and San Shinobi. The biggest loss was the death of 3rd Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen, which led to the death of the current village. The operation has not returned to normal. Then the funeral of the 3rd generation hasn't ended yet, and there are powerful ninjas who have not yet known where the sacred invaded, and who they will fight with after they come to the village. As a result, all that large area is turned into coke. Many ninjas were sent to strengthen the security of the village. After such a disturbance, the security force was strengthened by 30%, which resulted in a serious shortage of ninjas to perform tasks. As a result, some highly rated genins had to accept some shunin tasks. And today, when the first sun shines on Konoha village, the Konoha executive who temporarily represents Hokage suddenly issued an announcement. Uchiha Sasuke attacked Konoha's high-level Shimura Danzo, who had served as Hokage's assistant last night, and severely injured him. He has now defected. From now on, he has defined him as rebelliousness. All his future actions have nothing to do with Konoha, and he is wanted here. Make. That's right, the novice period before the Chunin selection examination had an extremely brilliant task performance. During the Chunin examination, he showed a strength comparable to Jonin. Almost all ninjas believed that he would be the leader of Konoha in the future. Uchiha Sasuke, the most powerful of the 9 newcomers with the highest overall qualifications, gave up his bright future and defected. In just half a day, this seemingly unnoticeable news that Genin had defected was spread among all the ninjas in the village, which shows how many people are paying attention to Sasuke. In fact, it is not only Sasuke, except for the young Sakura who was seriously injured and killed by Orochimaru. The performance of the other 7 people in the Chunin exam is very eye-catching. The strongest graduate in history is truly worthy of the name. It started from the end of the Chunin selection exam. Almost everyone is watching their performance. And Sasuke, who was carrying the most expectations, defected so suddenly, how could they not be surprised? I can't figure out why Sasuke is full and has nothing to do to attack a high-level loser. But no matter how unthinkable, since the senior management has identified Sasuke as a rebel, then this is a solid fact, and when you encounter Sasuke in the future, you must find a way to take him down. However, it is only ordinary ninjas who can accept this fact that they have been with Sasuke day and night and have practiced for 5 years. Shikamaru, who have extremely deep feelings, immediately came to mind when they heard the news. Impossible. Although they didn't believe it, they also knew that the senior management would never be aimless in this kind of thing, so they almost simultaneously thought that at this time they should go to the person who knew Sasuke best, and at the same time knew all of them. Then, it evolved into Iruka's house. Izumi, who was lying on the sofa for some reason, looked at Shikamaru and others who were talking to Iruka in the hallway with great resentment. There can be no resentment. Advertisement. Last night, when Kwanmi concealed her identity and dragged the Bayunye mountain and several elite Chunin to the site of the incident, because she could not reveal her identity, all sword drawing skills could not be used, and she could only use basic swordsmanship and ninjutsu. Although there was Sharingan, she was with her illusion skills. Bayunyashin, who was also an elite Jonin, was basically unlikely to be hit, so in the end she was only able to play half of her strength and inevitably suffered some skin injuries. In fact, the shoulders and waist on both sides were scratched, plus some fragmentary bruises. After a period of rest, it was fine, and there was no need to go to the hospital, but Kwanmei's careful thinking became active. She was injured to help Iruka, which means that Iruka should have expressed her work injury for granted. If it was in the past, she must have been insincerely to eat and take a bath. Oh, the money is still she made it herself. After all, Iruka's money was used to buy things like single man's treasure, but now Iruka is her lover, there is no reason to perfunctory it. So she pestered Iruka early in the morning to help her change her dressing and massage. Originally Iruka wanted to refuse, but Kwanmi deliberately exaggerated the situation of their battle with Bayunyashin last night, and then pitifully exposed her scratched shoulder. Iruka was overwhelmed with the bandage, and could only compromise. However, when Iruka's expression was a little unnatural, he took out the medicine box and was about to remove the bandage from Kwanmi. Shikamaru and the others rang the doorbell as if they had seized this extremely suitable moment, and it finally evolved into the current situation. Izumi even took off her coat, and she wore a tight-fitting vest on her upper body, showing her belly. She was hopefully waiting for Iruka to really face her charm as a woman, and she was disturbed by Shikamaru and the others. It's not strange that she has no resentment since she has been in love since she fell in love. Come in and talk. After the resentment dissipated, Izumi suddenly heard Iruka say this. Only then did she realize that her current dress was a bit revealing. She immediately rolled her body with the sheet on the sofa, and then went back to the room with a swift motion. What did you say to Iruka before? I heard a little bit, and it's inconvenient to move. In Izumi's mind, it doesn't matter what she wears when the two of them are at home with Iruka, but if there are outsiders, especially other men, she is very concerned, although Shikamaru, Toa and Shino are just hairless. Little kid, but she just didn't want to be taken advantage of by men other than Iruka. Therefore, when she left the house, whether she was going to the streets or performing tasks, her dress was very conservative, giving people a very rigorous feeling, and it was also in line with her temperament as an iceberg beauty in the eyes of outsiders. Iruka, who noticed Azumi's movements, couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth. Then I realized that he was being fooled by this girl again, but he didn't care about being fooled by Azumi. If he cared, under the force field perception, Azumi's small movements were basically impossible. Escape from Iruka's eyes. He shook his head, and shook off the fascinating feeling in his mind, and then he greeted Shikamaru and others to come in. Iruka's house is not too big, but it's not too crowded to sit in the living room with 8 people. After Shikamaru and the others sat down, Iruka directly responded to their question just now. Sasuke's approach is indeed a defect in a sense, but I don't think he has done anything wrong. In my eyes, he is just moving in the direction he wants to move forward. Therefore, as a teacher, I will not oppose his approach. Chapter 207. Ms. Iruka, you recognized Sasuke's defection. Shikamaru looked at Iruka in disbelief. He couldn't think that Iruka would say this. Others were the same. Their faces were full of unthinkable colors, especially the little Sakura and Ino, who had always liked Sasuke. Their reaction was particularly intense. Ms. Iruka, how can you say that? Sasuke is our companion and the person who respects you most. He defected. Don't you feel sad? Ms. Iruka, it is impossible for Sasuke to betray the village at all. It is probably because of being deceived or for other reasons we don't know. At this time, we should. Before I say this, Iruka interrupted the eager words of the two directly, staring at him, and said in a deep voice, you tell me first, do you really know Sasuke? Know his experience, his way of thinking, is his ideal. Hearing this, everyone couldn't help being stunned. Think about it, they only know that Sasuke is a hot companion on the outside. Although they have rarely spoken, they have a deep bond with them who have practiced together for 5 years. Sakura seems to have been killed by Orochimaru since Sasuke's reaction. It can be seen. But is this really the only thing in Sasuke? Obviously impossible. Everything has a reason. All Sasuke's actions are choices made according to his own thinking. No one confuses him. The reason why he wants to leave Konoha is because his ideas conflict with Konoha's position. In other words, Konoha can no longer accommodate his skills. In order to implement his own ideas, he can only choose to leave the village. As he said, Iruka suddenly raised his head inexplicably and glanced at the window sill behind Sakura. There was an orange figure standing there sometime, and the corner of his mouth was slightly hooked, revealing a meaningful smile. If you want to deny his actions, you must first understand why he did it, or even understand everything about him. Otherwise, even if you can force Sasuke back, you will end up depressed in the end. After all, you think for the right things, good thoughts about Sasuke are just imposing goodwill on others. There is no difference between goodwill and maliciousness. At the end of the speech, Shikamaru, the most intelligent, was the first to react. Iruka-sensei, what is Sasuke's philosophy? Or, what is the philosophy? Is it the same as the will of fire that Master Third Hokage said? The will of fire. Iruka smiled slightly, resting one hand on the armrest of the sofa, supporting his chin, and a look of nostalgia appeared on his face. The will of fire is a kind of spirit, as the old man of third generation said. This is a strong spirit to protect the village, protect the important people around you, so that they will not be harmed, and entrust the future to them. After a pause, Iruka shook her head suddenly for some reason. A touch of sadness flashed across her face, but soon recovered. No one noticed except Shikamaru. When Shikamaru was thinking, Iruka resumed the topic just now after he recovered. The will of fire is not an idea, but a derivative of personal feelings. Specifically, you think something is important, and then there was a strong desire to protect this kind of thing, something completely different from the idea. Then Mr. Iruka, what is the philosophy? Iruka did not immediately answer, but looked at Naruto, who was pacing over, with a complex face. After noticing Iruka's eyes, everyone finally noticed that there were more people in the room. Naruto, can you recall what I said to you and Sasuke 5 years ago? Advertisement. Naruto nodded, and then under the gazes of everyone's doubts, he said softly, the idea is to break free from the constraints of individuals, families, and villages, not to be affected by anything, and to think about all phenomena you see from the most objective point of view. After drawing the conclusions of all the problems, the thinking rules derived from the conclusions. After repeating what Iruka once said to him, Naruto's face suddenly became more complicated. Iruka-sensei, Sasuke, has he found his idea? Hearing this, especially after perceiving the unwillingness contained in Naruto's complex look, Iruka's smile became even greater. Yes, he is now a real strong man and the only outstanding student I recognize. The only recognition. Hearing this, the faces of the people who were thinking about the concept suddenly became weird. Although they knew that Iruka valued Sasuke very much, they said it too much, as if they were only used to set off the excellent green leaves of Sasuke. Ms. Iruka, do you mean that only those who have ideas can get your approval? Yes, Iruka said heavily, then narrowed his eyes and continued, for me as a teacher, you are just ordinary works with power and will now. There is only a combination of power, will and will. Only the people with the idea can be called the real strong and the most perfect work. The biggest gap between you and Sasuke is the idea. Not to mention the level of the idea, you don't even have your own idea, so I take it for granted that Sasuke should not leave Konoha, and I take it for granted that reality will develop according to his own thinking and ideas. I have never considered Sasuke's real ideas, nor have I learned about the real Sasuke. Hearing this, everyone fell silent, and the heart that had been anxious about Sasuke's defection finally calmed down a bit. Anyway, the one who broke the silence was Naruto's as always, without the slightest confusion, so firm, so decisive, and all of a sudden, everyone who was caught in painful thinking came back to their senses. Sasuke is our companion. Since we can't understand his thoughts now, let's ask him face to face. If the village can't tolerate his ideas, we will find a way to change the village until it can be tolerated. Anyway, Sasuke must not be allowed to leave the village like this. Sure enough, it's still so naive. Iruka shook his head, but for some reason, listening to Naruto's words that he did not give up even after saying that Sasuke left the village was entirely his own will, a complex thought emerged in his heart. After hearing Naruto's words, Shikamaru and the others were instantly infected by the firmness in the words, and they joined together, and then looked at Iruka at the same time. Iruka-sensei, do you know where Sasuke is now? Please tell us. Please. Quote quote. Looking at Shikamaru and others who stood up and bowed at the same time, Iruka suddenly smiled helplessly. Although the situation was developing as he imagined, after feeling their unwavering conviction, he still felt a sense of inexplicability. Touching, that seems to be the most unreliable thing that he had once witnessed the tragedy and despair of countless people and made him give up, thinking that there is no need to keep it in his heart. I don't know what that indescribable thing is in my heart. Iruka shook his head, throwing away the messy thoughts, and then nodded to the crowd, while taking out a portion from her arms. The prepared scroll said lightly. If this is the case, I will help you once. Remember, only this time, no matter whether you succeed in turning Sasuke back, or forcibly bringing Sasuke back, or Sasuke completely defected, I will never intervene in this matter again. N.S. Chapter 208. Real Approval. In a cave where the country of fire was only a few hours away from the border, among the 4 men and 1 woman sitting around the fire, the charming figure suddenly stood up and looked at it with an incredible face while holding a scroll in his hand. A handsome young man sitting flat on the ground with a calm face. Go to the Vale of the End in 3 days. Why, Chief? Something like that happened. Konoha must have strengthened the domestic security now. Isn't it because he is staying in the country of fire at this time to seek death? Even if that man cares about your relationship, the teacher-student friendship shouldn't embarrass you, and other Konoha Shinobi people can't let you go, right? No more cuts and by although the same doubts, but no plans to oppose no objection, he naturally wouldn't say anything. As for Lei Ya, at this time, he seems to have become Sasuke's most loyal supporter. Even if Sasuke lets him commit suicide now, he will execute without hesitation. This is Mr. Iruka's order, and it is the last thing I need to do before leaving. Sasuke said lightly, his face flashed with determination. Since he has chosen a path destined to be full of thorns, hesitating will only stand still. If you want to move forward, you must come up with the corresponding awareness. He said that there is no awareness of fighting against Naruto and the others, which is enough to prove his heart. Still hesitating and avoiding, and that trace of hesitation is likely to become a barrier in front of the road he chose in the future, with endless troubles. The last thing. Sasuke didn't answer right away, but suddenly took out 2 photos from his arms. One is a photo of Konoha's common shift team, in which Kakashi smiles reluctantly, while young Sakura looks at him with obvious shyness, who is staring at him with Naruto's opponent's gaze. The other is a group photo of 9 special graduates trained by Iruka at the school gate at the suggestion of 3 girls, Sakura, Ino, and Hinata when they graduated. In the photo, Shikamaru and Hinata looked at Naruto who was yawning because of lack of sleep. Ino and Sakura desperately leaned on Sasuke, while Sasuke looked impatient. Shino didn't have a sense of existence as always, and his teeth were still teasing. Akamaru, Choji didn't put down the snack bag even if he took photos. Although the faces of everyone are different, Sasuke can feel each other's most sincere feelings from it. It is precisely because they are used to each other and agree with each other that they can show the unreserved and truest side in front of each other. The kind of warm feelings that have been together for 5 years, like a family member, is the biggest reason that, apart from Iruka's dedication to him, prevents him from falling into the dark abyss of revenge, and it is also one of his most important things. But now, after seeing the entire shinobi realm, I came to that conclusion, now that I have the idea, and if I want to truly embark on that path, even if that feeling cannot be completely abandoned, it must be sealed in the deepest part of my heart. Crackling. The blue and white arc flickered wildly, illuminating Sasuke's flash of hesitation. The next moment, only a few sounds of ZZ were heard. The 2 photos instantly turned into countless fragments and were ignited by the arc in midair. A series of flames completely turned into ashes and fell on the ground. Just like Sasuke's state of mind at this time, it dissipated with the wind, and I don't know whether the feeling that was so important to him was completely abandoned by him, or it was sealed in the deepest part of my heart, waiting for someone to be awakened someday. Seeing Sasuke's gradually becoming indifferent face, he suddenly narrowed his eyes without cutting, and then chuckled, I have a problem that I can't figure out, can you tell me? Chief. Sasuke glanced at him faintly, what's the problem? I didn't immediately ask him again. I don't know what he thought of. A very empathetic expression suddenly appeared on his face, and his tone suddenly became inexplicable. I tried to create an ideal society in the country of water. I don't need it. Killing can also survive, a stable society. For this reason, I launched an armed coup and tried to kill Mizukage to replace it. Unfortunately, I failed. Hearing this, a flash of contempt flashed across Lei Ya's face. How can a man who can have the name of the shadow in the village of Blood Mist be killed so easily? I don't know if there is a limit to the height of the sky, kid. The owner of the beheading sword among the 7 ninja swords of the same period as Thunder Yacht is Loquat Juzo. As a senior, Thunderya is naturally qualified to say not to kill the little ghost again, but how can he recognize this kind of arrogance if he does not kill again? Contemptuous title. This is also the reason why Lei Ya has never dealt with Lei Ya since joining the organization. Advertisement. Hearing Lei Ya calling herself a little ghost again, she frowned, but Bai had directly made Shinbin and looked at Lei Ya with an angry expression. Thunder Tooth, shut up. Just when the atmosphere became a little weird because of Lei Ya's words, Sasuke suddenly shouted coldly, and when she heard Sasuke's dissatisfied voice, Lei Ya's heart trembled suddenly. Sorry. First, boss. Sasuke ignored him. Instead, he focused his attention on not cutting him again and beckoning him to continue. Obviously, the topic just now aroused Sasuke's interest. He originally thought that not cutting again was just for money, so he would accept whatever task. The desperados did not expect him to have such a side. Under the beating firelight, the daunting face of Don't Cut was dyed with a red light, and that cold and ruthless temperament seemed to be polished by the firelight, bringing a trace of humanoid gentleness. No longer is not a talkative person. After being silent for a while and organizing the language, he finally speaks slowly. Although I have lost my ideals after a long period of wandering and fleeing, the reason why I still remember the reason for that ideal. After a pause, no longer cut the decapitating knife suddenly inexplicably unloaded, lay it on the crossed knees, and wipe it, on the smooth surface of the knife, reflecting the extremely complicated look of no longer cut. That's an idea that you can only have after experiencing the real darkness. What you said to Danzo yesterday is not an ideal society, but it is not ideal in the world. So, what I want to know is, the leader, why do you have that kind of thinking? Mr. Cut again. Bai Na yelled and didn't cut it again, as if he wanted to say something, but he stopped talking, and the weak look of Juyu who was not far away almost sprayed out his nosebleeds. No longer knowing what Bai was trying to say, he raised his hand and interrupted his speech. At this moment, Sasuke suddenly raised the corner of his mouth and revealed a very sincere smile. Perhaps, this is. Crackling. Under the movement of the spiritual realm, a few strands of blue and white were constantly beating around Sasuke, and under the thunder light, the figure of Sasuke who had dispersed all the darkness became extremely clear. The so-called human fortune. Just as the fate of the students was about to converge, Iruka, their teacher, was in the Hokage office at this time, with a rather uncomfortable face watching sitting on the Hokage office chair, one with long light blonde hair and a huge chest. The imposing manner made the woman who was full of vigilance in the eyes of Izumi, who was standing next to Iruka. Naruto and the others left the village as my authorization, but I have been approved by the two consultants, and although you have confirmed your appointment as the 5th Hokage, after all, you have not yet performed the inauguration ceremony or formally took office. Why should I call them back? Iruka is right. You are an old woman who is in her 50s but still pretends to be a young girl. She hasn't formally served as a Hokage. Why do you point fingers at my Iruka's approach? Even when the 3rd generation was in office. Forcing my Iruka to accept the task, which shallot are you? Hearing Izumi's words full of gunpowder in order to declare her sovereignty, Tsunade's forehead suddenly sounded with a crisp sound. The next moment, only a boom was heard. The large desk was instantly shattered into fragments, and countless documents flew into the air, and then it seemed like the goddess scattered flowers slowly and fell to the ground. Smelly boy, who do you call the old woman? Chapter 209. In a cave where the country of fire was only a few hours away from the border, among the 4 men and 1 woman sitting around the fire, the charming figure suddenly stood up and looked at it with an incredible face while holding a scroll in his hand. A handsome young man sitting flat on the ground with a calm face. Go to the Veil of the End in 3 days. Why, Chief, something like that happened. Konoha must have strengthened the domestic security now. Isn't it because he is staying in the country of fire at this time to seek death? Even if that man cares about your relationship, the teacher-student friendship shouldn't embarrass you, and other Konoha Shinobi people can't let you go, right? No more cuts and by although the same doubts, but no plans to oppose no more no objection, he naturally wouldn't say anything. As for Lei Ya, at this time, he seems to have become Sasuke's most loyal supporter. Even if Sasuke lets him commit suicide now, he will execute without hesitation. This is Mr. Iruka's order, and it is the last thing I need to do before leaving. Sasuke said lightly, his face flashed with determination. Since he has chosen a path destined to be full of thorns, hesitating will only stand still. If you want to move forward, you must come up with the corresponding awareness. He said that there is no awareness of fighting against Naruto and the others, which is enough to prove his heart. Still hesitating and avoiding, and that trace of hesitation is likely to become a barrier in front of the road he chose in the future, with endless troubles. The last thing. Sasuke didn't answer right away, but suddenly took out 2 photos from his arms. One is a photo of Konoha's common shift team, in which Kakashi smiles reluctantly, while young Sakura looks at him with obvious shyness, who is staring at him with Naruto's opponent's gaze. The other is a group photo of 9 special graduates trained by Iruka at the school gate at the suggestion of 3 girls, Sakura, Ino, and Hinata when they graduated. In the photo, Shikamaru 1 Hinata looked at Naruto who was yawning because of lack of sleep. Ino and Sakura desperately leaned on Sasuke, while Sasuke looked impatient. Shino didn't have a sense of existence as always, and his teeth were still teasing. Akamaru, Choji didn't put down the snack bag even if he took photos. Although the faces of everyone are different, Sasuke can feel each other's most sincere feelings from it. It is precisely because they are used to each other and agree with each other that they can show the unreserved and truest side in front of each other. The kind of warm feelings that have been together for 5 years, like a family member, is the biggest reason that, apart from Iruka's dedication to him, prevents him from falling into the dark abyss of revenge, and it is also one of his most important things. But now, after seeing the entire shinobi realm, I came to that conclusion, now that I have the idea, and if I want to truly embark on that path, even if that feeling cannot be completely abandoned, it must be sealed in the deepest part of my heart. Crackling. The blue and white arc flickered wildly, illuminating Sasuke's flash of hesitation. The next moment, only a few sounds of "zzz" were heard. The two photos instantly turned into countless fragments and were ignited by the arc in midair. A series of flames completely turned into ashes and fell on the ground. Just like Sasuke's state of mind at this time, it dissipated with the wind, and I don't know whether the feeling that was so important to him was completely abandoned by him, or it was sealed in the deepest part of my heart, waiting for someone to be awakened someday. Seeing Sasuke's gradually becoming indifferent face, he suddenly narrowed his eyes without cutting, and then chuckled, "I have a problem that I can't figure out, can you tell me?" "Chief." Sasuke glanced at him faintly, "What's the problem?" I didn't immediately ask him again. I don't know what he thought of. A very empathetic expression suddenly appeared on his face, and his tone suddenly became inexplicable. "I tried to create an ideal society in the country of water. I don't need it. Killing can also survive, a stable society. For this reason, I launched an armed coup and tried to kill Mizukage to replace it. Unfortunately, I failed." Hearing this, a flash of contempt flashed across Lei Ya's face. How can a man who can have the name of the shadow in the village of Blood Mist be killed so easily? I don't know if there is a limit to the height of the sky, kid. The owner of the beheading sword among the 7 ninja swords of the same period as Thunder Yacht is Loquat Juzo. As a senior, Thunder Yacht is naturally qualified to say not to kill the little ghost again, but how can he recognize this kind of arrogance if he does not kill again? Contemptuous title. This is also the reason why Lei Ya has never dealt with Lei Ya since joining the organization. Advertisement. Hearing Lei Ya calling herself a little ghost again, she frowned, but Bai had directly made Shinbin and looked at Lei Ya with an angry expression. Thunder Tooth, shut up. Just when the atmosphere became a little weird because of Lei Ya's words, Sasuke suddenly shouted coldly, and when she heard Sasuke's dissatisfied voice, Lei Ya's heart trembled suddenly. Sorry. First, boss. Sasuke ignored him. Instead, he focused his attention on not cutting him again and beckoning him to continue. Obviously, the topic just now aroused Sasuke's interest. He originally thought that not cutting again was just for money, so he would accept whatever task. The desperados did not expect him to have such a side. Under the beating firelight, the daunting face of Don't Cut was dyed with a red light, and that cold and ruthless temperament seemed to be polished by the firelight, bringing a trace of humanoid gentleness. No longer is not a talkative person. After being silent for a while and organizing the language, he finally speaks slowly. Although I have lost my ideals after a long period of wandering and fleeing, the reason why I still remember the reason for that ideal. After a pause, no longer cut the decapitating knife suddenly inexplicably unloaded, lay it on the crossed knees, and wipe it, on the smooth surface of the knife, reflecting the extremely complicated look of no longer cut. That's an idea that you can only have after experiencing the real darkness. What you said to Danzo yesterday is not an ideal society, but it is not ideal in the world. So, what I want to know is, the leader, why do you have that kind of thinking? Mr. Cut again. Bai Na Na yelled and didn't cut it again, as if he wanted to say something, but he stopped talking, and the weak look of Juyu who was not far away almost sprayed out his nosebleeds. No longer knowing what Bai was trying to say, he raised his hand and interrupted his speech. At this moment, Sasuke suddenly raised the corner of his mouth and revealed a very sincere smile. Perhaps, this is. Crackling. Under the movement of the spiritual realm, a few strands of blue and white were constantly beating around Sasuke, and under the thunder light, the figure of Sasuke who had dispersed all the darkness became extremely clear. The so-called human fortune. Comma 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 comma. Just as the fate of the students was about to converge, Iruka, their teacher, was in the Hokage office at this time, with a rather uncomfortable face watching sitting on the Hokage office chair, one with long light blonde hair and a huge chest. The imposing manner made the woman who was full of vigilance in the eyes of Izumi, who was standing next to Iruka. Naruto and the others left the village as my authorization, but I have been approved by the 2 consultants, and although you have confirmed your appointment as the 5th Hokage, after all, you have not yet performed the inauguration ceremony or formally took office. Why should I call them back? Iruka is right. You are an old woman who is in her 50s but still pretends to be a young girl. She hasn't formally served as a Hokage. Why do you point fingers at my Iruka's approach? Even when the 3rd generation was in office. Forcing my Iruka to accept the task, which shallot are you? Hearing Izumi's words full of gunpowder in order to declare her sovereignty, Tsunade's forehead suddenly sounded with a crisp sound. The next moment, only a boom was heard. The large desk was instantly shattered into fragments, and countless documents flew into the air, and then it seemed like the goddess scattered flowers slowly and fell to the ground. Smelly boy, who do you call the old woman? Chapter 210. The Valley of the End is named after the 2 great ninjas who founded the Konoha Shinobi village, Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara, where they confronted each other. On both sides of the waterfall, there are huge stone statues of these 2 legendary figures. At this time, on top of the 2 opposing stone statues, 2 groups of people who were already in opposing positions stood respectively. On the other side, headed by a handsome young man with black hair, standing on top of the Uchiha Madara stone statue. There are dozens of people in total, wearing a black robe that can hide the whole body in it. The surface of the robe is illuminated by the strong summer sun. A few weird black lines are faintly reflected, very weird. On the other side, there is a blonde boy headed by 8 boys standing on top of the Senju Hashirama stone statue. They are dressed in different clothes, but all carry Konoha forehead protector. Click. With the decapitating knife on his back, Nozan heard a soft noise. When he turned his head and looked over, he saw that Sasuke's seemingly weak and unreliable figure trembled slightly, and then he noticed that Sasuke was holding the scarlet edge. His hands tightened. Obviously, the soft noise came from Sasuke's hands. After noticing this, he suddenly narrowed his eyes without cutting, and no one knew what he was thinking at this time. Uncharacteristically, Naruto didn't immediately challenge Sasuke in a loud voice, but said in a very calm tone, "Sasuke, Mr. Iruka said that you left the village for the sake of ideas. Is this true?" Hearing that, Sasuke suddenly relaxed for some reason, and the scarlet edge he was holding tightly also completely loosened, as if he had figured out something. The corner of his mouth raised slightly. "Are you suspicious of Mr. Iruka's words?" Although the question was answered with a question, the answer was already obvious, and the last trace of luck in everyone's heart was finally completely shattered. "Why?" Little Sakura stood up, her expression full of eagerness and incomprehension. "Even for the idea, there is no need to leave the village. As long as you tell us, no matter what the idea is, we will definitely help you, so-called companion, isn't it just like that?" Little Sakura is right, Sasuke. Ino also stood up, shouting at Sasuke frantically, "Please, come back, don't leave us." Facing the two girls who had been trying to get close to him on weekdays, Sasuke's face flashed a little shake, but it was only a flash, and it was only a moment, completely replaced by indifference. Can help the leader implement the idea. Haha. Without cutting his arms around his chest, Sasuke looked at the people standing opposite with disdain, but Sasuke didn't feel any dissatisfaction with his sudden interruption. "What are you laughing at?" Ya shouted. "If you don't cut your face, the disdain will be even worse, laughing at you a bunch of little ghosts who don't even know what the leader's philosophy is, they just rant and say these beautiful things that are useless. You think the leader is talking to you? Is it a kid who can only play ninja games? Damn it, this guy." Ya and the others immediately became angry, but Shikamaru raised his hand to prevent them from trying to rush over, and then looked solemnly at the silent Sasuke, and asked straightforwardly. "Sasuke, what is your philosophy?" "My philosophy." While whispering, a gust of wind blew the black robe on Sasuke's body, and the long and narrow bangs swayed back and forth with the hem of his clothes, giving him a feather-like solemn atmosphere. After a little pause, his eyes gradually became distracted. "Stand up." After a while, Sasuke suddenly grabbed a leaf that was floating in the wind and held it gently in his hand. Then, a blue-white light flashed in his hand. The next moment, with a pop, green the leaves completely turned into debris, like the last obstacle in his heart, completely dissipated in the wind. When the last touch of green debris disappeared, Sasuke's eyes suddenly condensed. Advertisement. All the contradictions and struggles in the world are the result of the human heart, and what I want to do is to destroy the ambitions of all people, cut off all the cause and effect, hatred and darkness that continue to this day, and use absolute systems and power to regulate the world. Hearing that, Shikamaru and the others looked at Sasuke with incredible faces. They never thought that what Sasuke wanted to do would involve the whole world. At this time, they finally understood what Iruka had said to them before, Konoha could not. The meaning of the sentence containing Sasuke's capacity. However, after understanding, their hearts became heavier, because they understood that if Sasuke really planned this way, it would mean. Yes. Sasuke raised his head slightly and looked at the boundless sky behind everyone, with an indifferent voice. "I want to destroy the ninja system, destroy the existing world structure, destroy the entire world, and finally, become the supreme being that rules everything. Reshape the world in ruin. He will become the public enemy of the world." However, just when everyone's faces were extremely heavy, Naruto, who was standing at the front, showed an abnormal and clear look, and then walked 2 steps forward. After slowly exhaling a suffocating breath, he said something to let whether it was the companions behind him or the members of the interest organization standing not far away, they were amazed. "So, Sasuke, this is what Mr. Iruka once said can shake the whole world, right? You really have been truly recognized by Mr. Iruka." Iruka. The reason why Sasuke has such an extraordinary idea, is it because the man named Iruka led it? Hey, Naruto, what are you talking about? Sasuke's current unthinkable thought is Mr. Iruka. How is it possible? Why did Mrs. Iruka do this? Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Naruto's words made the little Sakura and the others fry the pot instantly. You must know that Iruka is a man who has directly affected their lives. If it were not for him, there would never have been them who had been well known in the village at the age of 13, so although they were a little in awe, Iruka has a lot of faulty character, but in essence they still trust and respect Iruka. When they hear that Sasuke has become like this, a large part of it is caused by Iruka, which is naturally difficult for them to accept. Even the members of the Shi group had a slight commotion, but Naruto and Sasuke ignored the reactions of their companions, and at the same time looked at each other with the most serious eyes. You should be able to understand my philosophy, who is also valued by Mr. Iruka. Naruto. Sasuke suddenly raised his hand, and the scarlet front in his hand suddenly flashed with a crimson light, accompanied by a scarlet curse that suddenly appeared. Yin, a beam of red light suddenly shot towards Naruto. Naruto. Hinata, who had been paying attention to Naruto, yelled anxiously, and then chakra burst out from under his feet, and quickly rushed towards Naruto, who was standing motionless in front of him as if he had been caught in the hold technique. At this time, the others also finally reacted. Looked at Sasuke, who raised another scarlet edge not far away with a face of disbelief, and at the same time knitted with one hand. Sasuke actually moved to them. However, as the only student among the students who could compare with Sasuke, Naruto still didn't react until the scary red light passed through his body, and he just stood up straight. The strange thing is that Naruto's body is clearly penetrated, but there is no trace of bloodline around Naruto's body. Until then, everyone remembered that Naruto has an ability to avoid attacks, and they suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. At this moment, the hand behind Naruto amidst the red light of the scarlet front suddenly broke apart with a bang, and then the fragmented red on suddenly gathered in the air, forming a scarlet curse almost instantly. Before everyone could react, Sasuke, who was standing opposite them, suddenly gave a soft drink. With a dazzling red light, his figure suddenly disappeared. When he appeared again, he suddenly stood behind Naruto and pressed his back to Naruto. Standing with his back, facing his former companion. The keen Shikamaru noticed that in Sasuke's scarlet pupils, he did not know when a pair of ink-colored hexagrams appeared strange to him. Chapter 211. Domination. Susanoo. With Sasuke's loud shout, a lavender light suddenly appeared where he and Naruto were standing. The next moment, a giant transformed from chakra suddenly appeared in front of everyone, and the horrible aura that it exudes was actually involuntarily produced. Kind of the idea of surrender. What kind of technique is this? Shino resisted the tremor in his heart, looking solemnly at the giant chakra in front of him. It seems to be Sharingan's ability. Sasuke, when did this ninjutsu develop? So strong, Sasuke is really ridiculously strong. When the chakra giant completely swallowed the figures of Naruto and Sasuke, the sound inside and outside Susanoo was completely blocked, and the last sound that everyone in amazement could hear was the one before Sasuke teleported over with the secret technique just now. The follow-up of the sentence. As the only opponent I recognize, what can you get from the question that Mr. Iruka asked us to think about? Let me test your current capabilities. With Sasuke's final voice, the huge palm of the chakra giant suddenly burst out with a crimson light, and then two scarlet swords swaying like flames appeared in the giant's hands out of thin air. The next moment, the giant roared. With a sound, raised his arm high, and then cut it off suddenly. Boom boom boom. The scarlet great sword did not hit the ground, but left a huge scarlet trace in the air. A huge roar came from the crack cut by the scarlet blade, instantly resounding through the earth, making everyone around you he couldn't help covering his ears, and urged chakra frantically, fighting against the loud noise that made them split with headaches. When the loud noise gradually disappeared and the senses gradually recovered, everyone was horrified to find that the figures of Naruto and Sasuke had evaporated like the world, disappearing completely without a trace. Parker, please hurry up. Several figures galloped through the bushes. Like Naruto and the others, they all wore Konoha's forehead protector. The leader was a tall silver-haired ninja, and Kakashi and others were ordered to return to Naruto's group. Just as everyone screamed with all their dignified faces, a teenager with a slice of watermelon suddenly leaned next to Kakashi. Ms. Kakashi, do you know why Sasuke defected? Hearing this, Kakashi's face suddenly turned dark, and then shook his head quite disappointed, without saying a word. Loss is inevitable. As a guide jonin, he lacks understanding of his subordinates. No matter how you say it, he cannot avoid the fact that his personal ability is insufficient. Although he knows that Uchiha Sasuke has always been worried about the extermination of the Uchiha clan in his heart, but he could see that Sasuke's heart was definitely not just hatred, especially Sasuke's attitude towards Iruka. It was impossible to leave the village without worrying about Iruka's feelings. Moreover, with Iruka's strength and importance to Sasuke, Sasuke did not need to defect to the village to pursue power, and since it was not for power, Kakashi did not understand why Sasuke had defected. How could it be, Kakashi-sensei, you are not? Tenten subconsciously expressed suspicion, but Guy suddenly raised his hand and stopped her speaking. At this moment, Asuma on the side suddenly complained. Damn it, Shikamaru, it's really for Sasuke to ignore everything. We wouldn't have taken such a long way if it weren't for him. Advertisement. There is also Shino and Ka. Their investigative abilities are actually used to obstruct their comrades. Let's see how I deal with them after this incident is over. Hong was also singing with Asuma husband and wife, and listening to their inexplicable complaints, Xiaoli and Tenten couldn't help but look at each other. They couldn't figure out why they suddenly said this at this time. Only Neji had a thoughtful look. Kakashi's heart was so careful that he knew right away that they were deliberately turning the subject off as friends at the same time, and couldn't help but feel warm. Ms. Kakashi, do you think Naruto and the others can really make Sasuke change his mind? Hearing this, Asuma and Hong looked at Guy very uncomfortably, and secretly blamed his students for being ignorant. At this time, mentioning Sasuke was obviously making Kakashi uncomfortable. Feeling the care of his companions at the same time, Kakashi's original heavy heart has been relieved a lot. After using his eyes to indicate that Asuma and Red don't care about himself, he said to Neji who approached, Sasuke has decided to leave, and he has attacked. Danzo is not a trivial matter. It is destined that he will be defined as rebellious. Sasuke is very smart and must know this, so no matter what the real reason for his defect is, he will not be able to return to the village unless. Unless. Kakashi raised his head speechlessly, his face suddenly becoming complicated for some reason, and it wasn't until Neji asked him again that he came back to his senses. Unless Mr. Iruka comes forward in person, with his position in the village and the weight he has in Sasuke's mind, Sasuke can definitely come back safely without any worries. Hearing that, a rather dark scar face suddenly appeared in Neji's mind. Although he only had one side in the qualifiers, every student he taught was so strong that he would remember it or not. Difficult, especially Hinata, the eldest lady who was almost abandoned by the family, was actually strong enough to easily defeat him under his guidance. In that case, why don't you invite Mr. Iruka to come forward? Mrs. Iruka certainly doesn't want his students to defect to the village, right? Tenten asked suspiciously. However, Kakashi sighed deeply in response to her. Kakashi hadn't thought of asking Iruka to come forward, but he thought that Sasuke was Iruka's most proud disciple. How could Iruka not know why Sasuke defected? Since Iruka didn't stop Sasuke's defection in the first time, it must have acquiesced to Sasuke's approach, and without Iruka's approval, Sasuke could not defect at all. Thinking about it this way, it makes no difference whether to go to Iruka or not. He didn't go to Iruka's house with Shikamaru and others. Later, when Tsunade talked to him alone, he confirmed his guess. Ms. Iruka has his own considerations. The adult world is very complicated. You don't understand it now. When you grow up, you may be able to understand Mrs. Iruka's thoughts. Seeing Kakashi's silence, Hong came out to make a round. Speaking. At this moment, Guy, who had been on the road in silence, suddenly remembered something and said softly, the students trained by Mr. Iruka are really outrageous. They are only 13 years old, and they can do it easily. The breakthrough of our Jonin's block. Hearing that, Asuma and Red nodded in agreement. Although they are the instructors of the 8th and 10th classes, Jonin is correct, but to be honest, Shikamaru and their growth have nothing to do with them, except for basic ninjutsu and chakra applications. Besides some actual combat experience, they have hardly taught anything. Shikamaru and the others have achieved what they are today, most of which are due to Iruka's credit. Even the training plan after graduation, Iruka has also formulated one by one according to their respective characteristics. And as the instructor of Jonin, they are just carrying out Iruka's teaching plan. Although they are slightly inexperienced, they already have the level of Jonin level in terms of strength. If they can have the level of Jonin level at this age, it will not be surprising that they will inherit the name of Hokage in the future. Especially Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto. Alas, if Sasuke did not defect. Who said no? I was very optimistic about that child before, who knows? When the four Jonin talked about Naruto and the others, they did not notice that Neji, Shaoli, and Tenten suddenly glanced at each other. The tacit understanding developed through a long time together, they immediately understood the meaning of each other's eyes. The next moment, they simultaneously slowed down a bit, and soon gathered together to whisper. Chapter 212 Physical Training Class. After discovering that Sasuke and Naruto disappeared, Sakura and Hinata started printing at the same time, and they activated their abilities in less than a second. Byakugan. Super dynamic vision. Hinata's eyes that were different from ordinary people suddenly appeared a few hideous blue veins, while the small Sakura's dark green pupils suddenly contracted. Among the 9 of them, if you only talk about insight and observation ability, little Sakura Hinata and Hinata are undoubtedly the strongest, so they soon discovered something was wrong. In Sakura's sight, in the scene that was slowed down by a few dozen times, not far from the place where Naruto and Sasuke disappeared, the air faintly appeared layered, as if there was a barrier that was invisible to the naked eye. How? Did you find anything? Shikamaru asked eagerly. Just as little Sakura wanted to answer, Hinata on the side eagerly responded, there is an enchantment there. Naruto and Sasuke must be in the enchantment. Let's pass. As he said, Hinata quickly gathered chakra under his feet, and before everyone responded, he suddenly jumped, taking the lead to the entrance of the barrier that can be clearly seen with Byakugan. Wait, Hinata, Shino, who is also a cautious sect, yelled at Hinata's eager back, but Hinata didn't seem to hear it. At this time, she only had Naruto's situation in her heart. She wished to rush to Naruto's side immediately, so what else could he care for? However, at this moment, Hinata suddenly felt her eyes dark. The next moment, she suddenly heard a voice from above. Bing done, kill 1,000 chances. Whoosh whoosh. Countless ice chibbons gleamed in the dazzling sunlight and shot towards Hinata at a very fast speed. Hinata felt the crisis and had to stop, then quickly raised his hands flat and turned quickly. Chakra burst out suddenly. Revolving heaven. Ding ding ding. A series of crisp sounds sounded, and thousands of books were knocked down by the chakra surrounding Hinata. When the thousands of books were gone, Hinata, who had been relieved of revolving heaven, had no choice but to return to the ground, looking angrily at the side floating in the air. The handsome boy on the ice mirror. Step aside. Bai did not respond to Hinata's anger, but kept his hands in the ninjutsu posture. Chakra gathered in his hands and quickly spread to the surroundings through his hands. Ice escape secret technique, magic mirror ice crystal. The next moment, only a chilling sound of click was heard, dozens of ice crystals appeared around him out of thin air. Then Bai released his hands, and then his 10 fingers changed rapidly. What was surprising was his left and right hands. The result was a completely different technique seal. When the last seal was completed, the surface of the original smooth ice mirror suddenly trembled slightly. Bing done, infinite murder. Dozens of ice mirrors suddenly dispersed, and then surrounded Hinata in the middle. Then, as a series of ripples appeared on the mirror, countless scalp-numbing senbon slowly emerged, sharply pointed. Hinata. After doing a series of actions in a short time, Bai put down his hands and slowly said, "This is the command of the leader. You must not disturb him and the boy's judgment. I advise you to stay here honestly, otherwise don't blame me for being impolite." As if to emphasize Shiro's attitude, senbon in the ice mirror got closer, and the pressure that was already tingling on the scalp became much stronger. Hinata. When the crowd outside the ice mirror saw Hinata trapped, they were shocked, and subconsciously wanted to rush to rescue them. However, they had just made a move and had not yet taken a step. The black-robed ninja who stood behind Sasuke before and confronted them suddenly appeared in front of them, looking at them indifferently. Advertisement. Obviously, if you want to save Hinata, or even break into the enchanted enchantment not far away, you have to hit the Sasuke's men in front of you. Judging from the faint aura of crisis they can feel, this is obviously not a simple matter. Things. Because, the only thing that can make them feel the aura of crisis is Jonin like their instructor, that is to say, the ninjas who stand in front of them all have the strength of Jonin standards. Comma 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 comma. When Naruto's gaze returned, he found that he was still standing on top of one of the stone statues in the Valley of the End. Sasuke was looking at him calmly on top of the other stone statue that stood opposite. However, the strange thing is that there is only Sasuke on the stone statue. The black-clothed ninjas who originally stood there seem to have evaporated from the world. Even if they use the perception of the wind, they can't perceive a trace of their existence. Not only that, but Naruto also found that he was behind him, just like Sasuke, there was no one. Shikamaru and the others were standing behind him a moment ago, but now they don't even have a footprint. You don't need to look at it. This is a space copied from reality. There are only two of you, me and you. Sasuke spoke slowly, the original dazzling crimson light of the short sword in his hand gradually dissipated, and it is the two crescent moons who can achieve this incredible miracle that they don't know where they got it, and they are giving up. After meaningless persistence, it was given to Sasuke's scarlet edge. Hearing what Sasuke said, Naruto stopped looking around. Although he didn't quite understand what Sasuke said about copy space, he understood that there were only two of them. Why did you bring me here? If it's just a competition, there is no need to avoid Shikamaru and the others, right? Competition. The corner of Sasuke's mouth raised, a disdainful smile appeared on his handsome face, and the look of Naruto gradually revealed disappointment. Do you think I will do anything with you to the end? Do you want to try? Upon hearing this, Naruto frowned suddenly. What do you mean? Sasuke sighed. Have you not figured it out yet? You really can't help it, it seems. When the words fell, Sasuke's eyes suddenly condensed, and the next moment, accompanied by a piercing thunder, countless blue and white arcs instantly covered Sasuke's body, and the thunder technique suddenly activated. Whoosh! The blue and white light seemed to cut through time and space, and appeared behind Naruto almost instantly. Then, with the extremely strong sound of breaking the wind, Sasuke's follow-up words quickly passed into Naruto's ears. It can only be explained by practical actions. Bang! A dull voice sounded, and the next moment, an orange figure suddenly flew to the bottom of the lake like a cannonball. Only a boom was heard. A huge energy exploded on the lake, and a few meters high water waves suddenly swayed. Can't calm down for a long time. Patter. The wet Naruto crawled out of the lake in a rather embarrassing manner, stood firmly behind the lake with chakra, raised his head, and looked at Sasuke, who was standing on the head of the stone statue with a complicated expression, and looked at him condescendingly. He has already felt it. Sasuke never left his hand with the kick just now, that is to say. That's right. Sasuke put the scarlet edge on the scabbard tied to the outside of his thigh, and at the same time lifted the thunder body technique, and then saw him raise his hands and quickly seal his hands. While gathering chakra, he slowly opened his mouth. This is the real battle. Snapped. When the last seal was completed, Sasuke suddenly straightened his chest, and then suddenly spit out the chakra gathered in his mouth. Fire style. Great fireball technique. The giant great fireball with thunder and lightning created with power flew out of Sasuke's mouth, and flew towards Naruto underneath with a powerful dive. Chapter 213 The Real Battle. In the ruins of two stone statues that were completely broken into pieces, Sasuke looked at Naruto who was lying on the ground and completely unconscious. Absolute strength gap. Not to mention the disparity between physique and ninjutsu and the use of abilities, the idea alone is doomed to the ending at this moment. Now Sasuke is already defined by Iruka as the real powerhouse of perfect work, while Naruto is still thinking. He is struggling on the road of groping, and now he only has the strength and will to compare with Sasuke. Even if he exploded with a force that did not belong to him, it would not be able to affect the doomed ending. Ms. Iruka, Naruto is really like me. Is there anything you care about? Inexplicably, Sasuke spoke suddenly, seeming to be muttering to himself, but his gaze looked towards an empty place not far away. Hey, have you noticed? There shouldn't be a copy space for the third person. A chuckle suddenly sounded, and the next moment, I saw the focus of Sasuke's line of sight, the air suddenly shook, and a figure that made him so familiar appeared in front of him. With the refraction technique and the ability to shield perception, Iruka's ninjas can be found, and their strength is absolutely sufficient to act as a shadow of a country, and Sasuke can do this. His strength is undoubtedly undoubted, but Iruka did not show any surprises, because he knew that Sasuke had noticed him since he entered this space. Therefore, what Iruka said Sasuke noticed was not that he appeared here, but because that's how I am taken by you, isn't it? That's right, Sasuke, who has fully grown up, has noticed that Iruka's attitude towards him and Naruto is essentially different from Shikamaru's reasons. That is, there is something about Iruka and Naruto that Iruka is particularly concerned about, namely, the possibility of changing the world. That's right, that's the origin of Sasuke's current philosophy, and it's something that only people with special experiences like him can have, but Sasuke is now a little doubtful whether Iruka is misguided, although he can feel a uniqueness in Naruto. His personality is charming, but he can't feel the possibility of being able to grow into an idea just like him is hidden in his personality. Hearing Sasuke's question, Iruka shrugged, then bent down, picked up the unconscious Naruto, and put it on her shoulders. Then she turned her head, her face calmly looked at the one in front of her that satisfied herself the most, and at the same time, the most similar student in his previous life. Sasuke, you are indeed excellent, excellent to the extent I did not expect, but because you are so good, you have not been able to see the simplest and simplest things. As he said, Iruka didn't know what he suddenly remembered, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly, and a look of empathy appeared on his face. Sasuke frowned and was about to ask him what he hadn't noticed. However, Iruka suddenly turned around, turned his back to Sasuke, and said slowly, the answers you get from other people's mouths can only be used as reference forever, the real answers you have to find it yourself, there is only one thing I can tell you. Tightening Naruto's rather heavy body, a strange light flashed in Iruka's eyes where Sasuke couldn't see it. There is something I really care about in Naruto, but it's something you have changed the world, the possibility is different. You need to think about it yourself. When the words were over, Iruka suddenly burst out with a silvery white light, and he, bathed in the light, looked very sacred and powerful in Sasuke's scarlet pupils, and it was difficult for people to give birth to the idea of surpassing it. Now you don't need to care about those things, just follow the path you have planned, but there is one thing you need to pay attention to. Whoosh! A powerful burst of powerful energy suddenly appeared in front of Sasuke, and the surrounding land suddenly cracked, forming countless large or small cracks, and then the violent wind pressure suddenly swept towards Sasuke, blowing Sasuke's eyes. It was difficult to open, so he had to cross his hands to protect his face. When the wind pressure began to decrease, the words left by Iruka finally reached his ears. Don't just keep your head down, stop and take a nap occasionally, maybe you can get a windfall. Advertisement. After a while, the movement caused by Iruka's unrestricted strength when he left completely dissipated. Sasuke slowly lowered his hand, raised his head, and looked in the direction of Iruka's departure, with a thoughtful look on his handsome face. The moment Iruka left the world of replication and came to the end of the real world. Water style, hard vortex water blade. Land done, Kai Madara wave. The water blade with strong penetrating power like a laser and the red beam that was no different from the laser flew towards Iruka's face. Upon seeing it, Iruka's mouth twitched. Is this welcome ceremony a bit too warm? Single quote. Inexplicable thoughts emerged in his mind, but Iruka's face was not flustered. He just raised his hand a little with a look of ease. The next moment, only two soft sounds of pop were heard, two attacks containing terrifying energy. It just disappeared into the air, as if it had never appeared before. Seeing that the attack was easily wiped out by Iruka, among the group of people wearing black robes, the two men who were still maintaining the knot printing couldn't help but look at each other. The next moment, both of them could clearly see the solemn color in each other's eyes. Ms. Iruka, after avoiding the enemy's attack dangerously, there were small wounds all over his body. Looking at Iruka who suddenly appeared not far away, his awkward teeth suddenly beamed and shouted. Ya's loud voice was like a static button being pressed, and everyone in the fighting stopped unanimously. At the same time, they looked at Iruka. After seeing that it was Iruka himself, Shikamaru and others suddenly looked relieved. Although most of the members of the Go wearing black robes have never seen Iruka, when Naruto mentioned the name Iruka just now, even their leader Uchiha Sasuke's face was a bit complicated. Naturally, they would not think that the owner of that name was insignificant idlers and so on, so they don't dare to act rashly anymore. Now there is no need for Iruka to do anything or say anything. As long as he stops there, no one dares to shoot in front of him, especially since he knows how terrible Iruka is. Putting away the weapon, Bai also lifted the magic mirror ice crystal, and slowly fell to the ground. Obviously, in the eyes of the two of them who had experienced the desperate power, the appearance of Iruka meant that the incident was over. Naruto. As soon as Bai unlocked the magic mirror ice crystal, Hinata saw Naruto who was carried by Iruka on his shoulders, and immediately rushed towards him. When she looked at Naruto's normally awkward little face, the look of sluggishness, suddenly the heart was pinched, his eyes gradually reddened, and the two lines of tears flowed down. Iruka, who had felt the sadness of Azumi's heart pierced in front of him, naturally understood Hinata's feelings. He put Naruto down and gave Hinata her support, while comforting. Don't worry, Hinata, although Naruto is hurt it's a bit heavy, but Wuyu's life will be fine after a week's rest. Hearing this, Hinata's face suddenly relaxed, and she felt relieved. While raising her hand to wipe her tears, she whispered like a murmur, too good. Naruto is okay. At this moment, the disarmed Noizan and Bai suddenly walked over, and looked at Hinata inexplicably, crying, and at Hinata, who was astonishingly different from just now, and then calmly said to Iruka. Let's talk about it, what do you plan to do with our Konoha rebel subordinates? As long as there is the possibility of resistance, he would never say such words of handing over his fate to others without cutting it, but after experiencing the brief and desperate confrontation in the Namibia, he knows that as long as Iruka does whatever he wants to do with them, they don't have the slightest chance to resist. If so, then there is no need to worry so much, just admit their fate. The corner of Iruka's mouth raised, and he was about to speak. At this moment, a contemptuous voice suddenly sounded not far away. Don't cut anymore. What do you mean? Just because he is the leader's teacher, you will let him dispose of it. Hey, it's worthy of a coup failure and wandering around like a bereaved dog. It seems that your backbone is also lost in the wandering, unexpectedly say this kind of thing that only waste can say. Hearing this, he suddenly turned his head without cutting, but what is strange is that his face is still very calm, without the slightest anger, but with a look as if he is looking at a dead person. He raises his hands and prepares to make a seal. Black Robe Ninja. Chapter 214. In many cases, it is only necessary for someone to take the lead. The people on the sidelines have the same thoughts as the leader. After a little hesitation, they will stand up and stand in the same position as the leader. Just like now, after the ninja who opposed no more cuts out, immediately there were 3 ninjas who usually had a better relationship with him. Miyamoto is right. We don't want to cut this kind of bullshit anymore, so what if that guy is the leader's teacher? Is it possible that all the achievements of the leader are not made by him? Isn't he just an unknown Konoha Shinobi? What's so scary? If the leader is to blame, it will be a big deal for my uncle to leave the organization. Anyway, my uncle would not want to stay in this organization headed by a kid. Hearing what the ninja who stood up last said, a cold light flashed across Iruka's originally indifferent face. When the other 3 heard the ninja who threatened to quit the organization, their faces suddenly hesitated. Although they did look at Iruka upset, they still had some sense of belonging to the organization, and they were a bit unwilling to quit the organization like this. However, the last sentence of the ninja was to say to their heart. They either have blood inheritance limits or have very high talents in a certain field. They naturally have their own arrogance, so they also have a 13-year-old kid as the leader. There are quite a lot of opinions on this matter, but Juyu, as the veteran, did not stand up against it, and they chose to remain silent for the time being. But even if they were silent for a while, the restless flame hidden in their hearts was beating all the time. After all, they didn't recognize Sasuke at all, and naturally there was no loyalty to it. Except for Kaiu, Raiga, and Nozawa and Shiro who have already recognized Sasuke's leadership status, the last 2 are also the 2 who used strong ninjutsu to attack the past when Iruka just appeared. They and Miyamoto and the 4 have already liked the members who gave birth to a rebellious heart. They have no trust in Sasuke at all, but their sense of belonging to the organization is much higher than that of Miyamoto. Even if they don't agree with Sasuke for the time being, they will not have the idea of defecting in a short time, so they don't have any. Just like Miyamoto and the others, they directly stood up against the self-assertion of not being cut, nor did they stand on their side, but stood in place with a complex expression, not helping each other. It seems that Crescent Moon's ability to manage the organization is not very good. Inexplicably, Iruka spoke slowly, and as soon as he opened his mouth, he mentioned that all the members of the organization are in awe, leaving countless legends of Uchiha Crescent Moon in the dark world. However, in Iruka's mouth, Crescent Moon seems to be just a need to care. The existence of is so, just open your mouth to mention it, without the slightest awe. Upon hearing this, the 4 ninjas not far away showed contempt at the same time. In their opinion, Iruka had no idea what the name Uchiha Crescent Moon represented in the dark world, so they all despised Iruka's ignorance. The 4 of them looked at each other, and then the ninja named Miyamoto suddenly threw chakra with nature transformation, and flew towards Iruka with a violent wind-breaking sound. The other 3 saw him move their hands and immediately put their hands together. The 10 fingers are dancing fast. Although the self-discipline I have set is not a last resort, not to put heavy hands on the weak, but it is a pity. Iruka raised his mouth and slowly raised his hand, palms facing the 4 people not far away. The next moment, with a silver-white light flashing from his fingertips, an invisible spatial ripple quickly surged forward. The 4 of them didn't realize it, they were still preparing their own ninjutsu, and at the moment when they completed the last Shuji seal. Advertisement. Chi 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 chi. 4 consecutive sounds are made when the substance is quickly cut off. The next moment, the 4 people who are just about to release ninjutsu shrink their pupils at the same time, their faces are full of incredible colors, as if they encountered something completely beyond their understanding. Generally. How could it be? The power faded like a tide, let alone launching ninjutsu, they felt it was extremely difficult to even raise their eyelids, exhausted the last trace of strength, and the murmur was their last voice in this world. After a while, the upper body of the 4 of them slid down suddenly with the waistline as the dividing line, and then only a bang sound was heard. Several stern blood arrows spouted from the waists of the 4 at the same time, which instantly stained their entire body. Red, the body that was finally cut in half fell into a pool of blood with such a puff, and the air gradually filled with a nauseating smell of blood. Until then, Iruka slowly lowered his hand, his face was so plain, he did not have the pride of killing 4 ninjas with Jonin strength in an instant. For him now, this level of ninja can be pinched to death by following his hands. Ants make no difference at all. Glancing at the ground that was gradually stained red with blood, Iruka retracted his gaze and murmured, the person who might obstruct my plan is not in my self-regulation. Now that they have participated in Sasuke's actions to reshape the world's ideas, for Iruka, there is no difference between exiting halfway and obstructing his plan, so killing them, Iruka has no psychological pressure at all. Vomit. A good living person was cut in front of his eyes. Red, yellow, and green internal organs were scattered all over the place, and the stomachs of Shikamaru and others who had never experienced this kind of battle were suddenly rolled up, and finally couldn't help it. They couldn't help but vomit out all the things they had eaten for a long time with a, wow, and even the dark green bile was vomited out in the end. It's commonplace not to cut in white, Juzuki and Raya. They are all ninjas who have experienced the baptism of blood. Naturally, they will not react to this, but Juzuki and Raya's eyes towards Iruka are already full. Fear, although they knew that the man whom the former leader Wanyu had been fond of would definitely not be worse off, they never thought that Iruka would be so ridiculously strong. Those are the 4 Jonin. Although their strength is only the bottom in the organization, they are not comparable to ordinary ninjas. They actually died in Iruka's hands so unclearly. Nine Moon and Thunder Fang didn't even know what Iruka was. How did you make the move? I just saw him raise his hand. In less than 5 seconds, Miyamoto and the others were cut in the middle. They might not be able to stop them if they changed this attack method. No, it should be said that they could avoid it's very hard to drive. And looking at Iruka's easygoing appearance, it is obvious that this is just what he does randomly, so how strong is his true strength? I can't imagine it at all. When they attacked the root base last time, they only saw Iruka move a little, and then they helped Sasuke to leave, without a clear understanding of Iruka's strength. Only then did they clearly feel why Sasuke, who can almost be compared with the crescent moon before giving up the position of leader, will show adoration on his face when he mentions Iruka, as if Iruka is him. The only goal in life is average. No longer cut and white is the calmest expression of all people. Although they are surprised at Iruka's power, they will naturally not be surprised if they have experienced that kind of desperate power once, and the two choices are not far away. The neutral wait and see interest prevents the members from looking at each other, and when they look at their faces calmly and do not slash, they are inexplicably more meaningful. Chapter 215 Shock. Thank you book friend Binglionjikson for your daily rewards. Your support is the motivation for my creation. Thank you very much. In Konoha Hospital, after a coma for a whole day, Naruto's eyelids finally moved. After a while, he slowly opened his eyes. The next moment, the familiar ceiling came into his eyes. It's a terrible loss, kid. Just regaining consciousness, and yet to check the surrounding situation, Naruto's mind suddenly sounded a dull and tyrannical voice, which was only he could hear at this moment. Regarding the sudden sound in his mind, Naruto's face didn't look surprised. Obviously, he was accustomed to the existence that made the sound and knew that existence was the monster that attacked the village 12 years ago. Nine Tails. Demon Fox. In the previous battle with Sasuke, he used the power of the Nine Tails Demon Fox and burst out 4 tails. After the powerful force poured in, he almost lost consciousness. Fortunately, the willpower strengthened in the spiritual realm and his physical fitness are far away. Super-ordinary people have fully exerted their due strength, but the result has not changed. Sasuke is too strong, so strong that he can only look up from behind, it is impossible to compare with it, and he has a philosophy that he will definitely grow faster than before. If this continues, he was originally the same as Sasuke. As Iruka's most valued student, he could only watch his opponent's back gradually drift away, and he would just not be in Sasuke's doomed extraordinary life. Naruto is very unwilling, but what if he is unwilling? Recalling that after Sasuke defeated him mercilessly yesterday, his indifference was filled with disappointed pupils, and the words that still pierced him until now. The limit for you without ideas is only this level. I really shouldn't have expectations of you without authorization. Perhaps, Mr. Iruka shouldn't have any expectations of you. After all, you are just a person who is indulging in dreams. Just ordinary people in self-satisfaction. That's right, it's absolutely impossible to catch up with Sasuke if you only move forward on the road of dreams. If you want to really catch up with Sasuke, who is already on the road to implement the concept at this time, or even surpass him, then you can only follow he, like Iruka, has become a truly strong man who combines strength, will and ideas. But does the idea mean that there can be there? If it were such a cheap thing, Iruka would not mention it so solemnly to them so many times, and Naruto is not good at thinking. It is impossible to get so much harvest from just one thing like Sasuke, even if he is like Sasuke saw with his own eyes the tragedies that happen almost all the time in the ninja world, and it was hard to get anything out of it. What's more, Sasuke has personally experienced the scourge of genocide and felt the consciousness of Itachi who sacrificed himself for the village, as well as the pain of Itachi. Only then did he fully realize that he finally got the idea that belongs to him, but what about Naruto? Although he had been living in the disgust and hatred of the villagers when he was young, he would only be treated unfairly wherever he went, but since he was 7 years old, Iruka began serving as his head teacher, his life track has returned to normal, and he has no experience at all. Having experienced the pain of Sasuke that almost broke him, it would be a hell if he could get the idea like Sasuke in this case. It seemed to be aware that Naruto didn't want to talk to herself. Nine Tails fell silent after a heavy nasal noise. After a while, when Naruto's wandering thoughts gradually returned, he suddenly felt a warm sensation in his ears. When he subconsciously turned his head to look over, a soft little face appeared in front of him. It was a girl that Naruto was familiar with. She was putting her hands on the edge of the bed, her head resting on the back of her hands. She seemed too tired, and her little face was full of exhaustion. When he saw that little face, Naruto's deep depression inexplicably reduced a lot, as if he had been cured. Hinata, Naruto whispered, but Hinata just blinked and uttered an unintelligible babble. After her tired face, she breathed evenly again and fell asleep. Naruto didn't hear what Hinata was murmuring because he didn't pay attention to it. He just thought that Hinata's sleeping like this was bad for her health, and wanted to wake her up and let her go to sleep. Advertisement. After discovering that Hinata could not wake up, Naruto could only struggle to get up, and then stretched out his hand, intending to wake her up, but at this moment. Click. The sound of opening the door. The next moment, Ya's loud voice suddenly penetrated in. Hey, Hinata, is Naruto awake? If you don't wake up, I'll guard it for you. You've been guarding all day and night. You should go back and rest. After Ya entered the ward, he saw Naruto tremblingly reaching out towards Hinata. From his perspective, no matter how you look at it, Naruto's current movements are a bit wretched, and the corners of his mouth twitched. Naruto, you want to be right. What does Hinata do? Hearing this, Naruto suddenly looked inexplicable. Well, what do you do? Just as Naruto was talking, she seemed to be awakened by Tooth's loud voice. Hinata, who was lying next to the bed, suddenly let out a delicate whisper. The next moment, she rubbed her sleepy eyes and opened it a moment later. Opening her eyes, she saw a handful of calluses. Ah, Hinata was startled, and instinctively took 2 steps back. When she recovered, she finally saw Naruto sitting on the hospital bed looking at her suspiciously. Naruto, I don't know what I thought of. Hinata's face suddenly became flushed, and her words became incoherent, and when she saw her look, Ya seemed to have identified some facts. Her face looked weird until now and she still hasn't reacted. Naruto of the matter. Sorry, I don't seem to be here at the right time, I'm leaving now. After talking, Ya didn't wait for the two to react, and left the ward in a hurry, leaving Naruto with a dumb face and Hinata with a shy face. Had it not been for awakening, Hinata would have fainted. Just when the atmosphere became a little weird, an untimely voice suddenly came from the window sill. Tisk tusk. With Ya's loud voice, it is estimated that there will be some strange rumors coming tomorrow, hehe. I look forward to it a little bit. Hearing the familiar voice, Naruto was stunned, and turned his head subconsciously, only to see a man with a scarred face leaning against the window sill, looking at him with a meaningful smile on his face. Ms. Iruka. After seeing Iruka, Naruto was not as happy as usual, and his expression was full of loss. Am I letting down your expectations? When Naruto and Sasuke were fighting in the Veil of the End in the replication world, Iruka was there. After witnessing the whole battle, he naturally knew why Naruto was uncharacteristically lost, so he did not ask. Then it depends on what I expect of you, Iruka said, and straightened up, then walked to the chair next to Naruto's bed and sat down, and took the hot tea from the sensible Hinata before continuing. To Naruto. Don't think so much. Although you haven't exceeded my expectations like Sasuke, you still don't disappoint me. You just need to be yourself. The things you deserve are definitely buried in your choice according to your heart. On that road, waiting for you to discover. Chapter 216, Misunderstanding. Sasuke said that the current ninja world is completely filled with despair. He wants to change the status quo in his own way and turn the world into the world that everyone expects. Mr. Iruka, is what Sasuke said true? If it is. Speaking of this, Naruto bit his lip suddenly, and his face gradually showed unwillingness. Upon seeing this, Iruka knew what he wanted to say next, and immediately raised his hand to prevent Naruto from speaking. I once told Sasuke that the answers you get from other people's mouths are always just references. You need to find and think about the real answers yourself. I hope you will remember this too. Think for yourself, but don't tell me that you are not smart enough or that you are not good at thinking. No matter how stupid people are, you can reach conclusions through practice. If you can't learn to think on your own, you will never want to catch up with Sasuke. Iruka's face is full of seriousness. Sasuke has embarked on the right path that he thinks is the right path. As his only opponent, you can only lie here and ask me for help. Naruto, I just want to ask you, what do you think? Is he really qualified to call himself Sasuke's opponent? Naruto opened his mouth, but couldn't say anything, and finally lowered his head guiltily. Hinata looked at Naruto with a worried expression on his side, and then looked at Iruka with a begging look. Looking at the weak gaze of the soft girl, Iruka suddenly felt a little uncomfortable, as if she was bullying her, and a sense of guilt emerged inexplicably in her heart. After shaking his head and throwing away the extra thoughts, Iruka continued to say to Naruto, of course, there is no problem with asking others for help. After all, no one is perfect. Everyone has things that cannot be done. But it would be wrong if you are dependent on it. I can help you once and twice, but I can't help you forever. Sooner or later you learn to face the problem alone and take it on your own. Otherwise, you will always be just a child who is not growing up. Well, I don't want you to be such a student who can't live without the teacher. I'm sorry, Mrs. Iruka. Iruka shook his head, and then sighed. He raised his head inexplicably and looked out the window. His eyes were a little lost. He was obviously thinking about something. After a while, he slowly spoke. Now, Naruto, do you want to see the outside world? Like Sasuke, use your own eyes to observe the real ninja world. Maybe the timing is not yet ripe, maybe this is a risk, but Iruka still tells him what he originally planned to say when Naruto recovers from Sasuke's defect and the absolute power gap a month later. There is no reason, it's just that Iruka wants to try to see what kind of result will happen if he doesn't follow the script written by himself, nothing more. His expectations of Naruto are even higher than those of Sasuke, because what Sasuke is walking now is exactly the path he has walked in his previous life. If there is no accident, the final result will never deviate too much from his expectations, but Naruto is different. There are countless possibilities in Naruto, among which there are even hidden possibilities to influence the future of the world. Iruka's greatest expectation for Naruto is whether there is an answer hidden in Naruto's body, whether there is an answer he has been pursuing. Naruto and Hinata looked at Iruka dumbfounded at the same time, wondering why he suddenly said such unclear words. They were not the only ones who were confused. At this time, a man with long white hair who was hiding outside the window was eavesdropping. His heart was also full of question marks. It took a while before his face showed a clear look. After leaving the hospital, Iruka came to an uninhabited alley. After stopping, he suddenly said without looking back, "Hey, Jiraiya, when are you going to follow me? Anything. Just come out and say. Don't be sneaky, otherwise don't blame me for treating you as a suspicious person." It's really helpless perception. Advertisement. A rather dull voice suddenly sounded behind Iruka. The next moment, the empty place suddenly shook, and then a man with long white hair appeared out of thin air. "Do you really care about Naruto? You can even do things like tracking. Are you so afraid of me instilling something strange in Naruto?" Iruka's mouth twitched, and his eyes looked at Jiraiya with an inexplicable meaning. Jiraiya was non-committal to Iruka's words. Since the last conversation, his attitude towards Iruka has cooled down, and he no longer has the appearance of having a conversation because of similar interests in the first place. Naruto has really grown up through the defect of Uchiha Sasuke, and the situation is developing according to your expectations, so next, you plan to let me take him out of the village to practice, right? Jiraiya didn't intend to talk nonsense with Iruka, and went straight to the subject from the beginning. Hearing that, Iruka, who could clearly feel Jiraiya's disgust, couldn't help shrugging. He didn't care about Jiraiya's eavesdropping or teasing his mind, and said calmly, "Yes, I do have this plan, but before that, there is still some preparatory work to be done." Jiraiya frowned. "What do you want to do?" Iruka did not sell it, and then said, "There is a restless guy in Naruto. Although that guy helped Naruto in the previous duel between Naruto and Sasuke, it does not mean that its existence is a boost to Naruto, and I can feel a certain change in Naruto's body after using its power. Intuitively, this is not a good thing, so this guy who may have an adverse effect on Naruto must be dealt with." Hearing this, Jiraiya did not breathe a sigh of relief, but frowned further. "Do you want to kill Nine Tails?" That's right, in Jiraiya's view, the Nine Tails demon fox that caused great damage to Konoha 12 years ago is not enough to look at compared to Iruka. Although he has not directly played against Iruka, nor has he intuitively felt the desperate power, he has witnessed Iruka effortlessly push the two powerful men, Itachi and Kisame, to be the shadow of a country. After the desperate situation, Jiraiya knew that Iruka's strength was absolutely strong to the point where he could not even imagine. Iruka has information about Nine Tails and Jinchuriki, which was given to him before Schwanyu completely withdrew from the ninja world, so he knew that if Nine Tails were killed directly or taken out, Naruto might be life-threatening. Even Iruka could not be sure whether Naruto, who is also a Jinchuriki and a capable person, will die after losing the tail beast. After all, the spiritual realm is not omnipotent. This world has its own laws. If the ending of Jinchuriki's death after losing the tail beast is one of the laws, then Naruto will definitely die. Therefore, if Iruka intends to kill Nine Tails directly or kill it withdrawing, it is equivalent to gambling with Naruto's life as a bet. Whether to do this or not, the answer is obvious to Iruka. Don't worry, I won't make fun of Naruto's life, he is also my cutest student anyway. Hearing this, Jiraiya's face suddenly relaxed. He was really afraid that Iruka would kill Nine Tails directly regardless of the 371. Even if Iruka said he could guarantee that Naruto would not die after pulling the tail beast, he would never agree, because Jinchuriki, who had been forcibly stripped of the tail beast before, died without exception. How could he believe Iruka's guarantee? Fortunately, Iruka didn't seem to have that idea, so Jiraiya temporarily withdrew his worst plan. "Then what are you going to do with Nine Tails?" Iruka's mouth suddenly twitched, revealing a smile full of conspiracy. "It's very simple, doesn't it let Naruto use its power? Then I will let it completely become Naruto's help." Chapter 217 The Fate of Nine Tails. The cloudless sky can always bring people a good mood, but in such bright and moving days, Iruka met the people in the whole village he didn't want to get involved with. "Yo, Mr. Iruka, Izumi, good afternoon, today you are still exuding youthful breath as always." Looking at Guy's dying uncle's face, Iruka felt bad all over, especially the word youth that came out of an uncle's mouth, which made him get goosebumps all over his body. However, Izumi Mi who was holding his hand smiled after hearing Guy's words. He seemed to be quite helpful to Guy's words. When Iruka wanted to ignore him and leave, Izumi responded to Guy. "Regards. Senior Guy, good afternoon, are you taking the students to practice?" Quan Mi glanced at the three genins standing behind Guy, and asked casually. Obviously, she just asked casually, without any curiosity. It was like asking an acquaintance, "Have you eaten?" The same greeting. However, Guy didn't seem to hear it, he sighed suddenly for some reason, and said in a tone that was contrary to his usual style. "Oh, that's right, but I have recently felt that they were wasting their talents when they practiced with me, so I couldn't get the energy up." Yep. Guy's inexplicable response immediately made Kwanmi a little confused, but Iruka looked at him suspiciously, always feeling that Guy, who seemed to have a problem with his brain, was a bit weird today. Hey, Guy, just tell me if you have anything to say, don't use this way of talking around the corners anymore. I listened to it awkwardly. Hearing Iruka's blunt words, Guy swallowed what he originally wanted to say, then raised his hand and scratched his head with embarrassment, and said, in fact, I came here specially for you. Teacher Iruka. Sure enough, if something goes wrong, there must be a demon. Iruka rubbed his temples helplessly. If it was the old one, he would definitely turn around and leave, but now he is quite humane, although he is physiologically eager to see this uncle who always yells that youth will never die, but to Guy the character of this person is still very appreciated, so he still patiently said. What can I do? Let me talk about it first, I won't help if it is too troublesome. Hearing this, Guy didn't say anything, but Izumi looked at Iruka a little weirdly. Although she fell in love recently and her senses were not as sensitive as before, she could still see such obvious changes in Iruka. After all, she has also been with Iruka for 5 years. She really knows the virtues of Iruka before, and even her roommate asks him to help out and bottle the soy sauce. He has to drag him at home for half 4 hours. When others ask him for help, they can definitely refuse without hesitation. When will you be as refreshing as you are now? Although there is a prerequisite, Yikwani understands him. As long as Guy wants him to help him, he will definitely not refuse. However, Iruka is obviously changing in a good direction, so Izumi just thought for a while and attributed Iruka's change to the change after love, and comfortably defined herself as the slacker Iruka that changed in the direction of the sun. Hero. It's not just Izumi who was surprised by Iruka's words. Xiao Li and the three of them were also surprised. They had asked Hinata and Naruto about Iruka's information and naturally knew his character and habits. They originally planned to leave if Iruka turned around. Using the second battle plan, Iruka must be patient to talk to them anyway, and even they have prepared the follow-up battle plan, but now Iruka has shown a patience, their battle plan is naturally nothing. Makes sense. But this is obviously a good thing for them, so although they don't understand that Iruka's performance and intelligence are different, they don't think much. Only Guy, who is second than Naruto, can't notice anything abnormal. A copy should look like this. That's it. I want Xiao Li to practice with you outside of the task. After all, Naruto and their strength are obvious to all. They are definitely the best class of students in the history of the village, and they are all trained by you, so they are teaching. On the other hand, no one in the whole village can compare to you. Although the potential of my 3 lovers is very good, they are definitely not inferior to Naruto, but my level is not enough to train them as good ninjas as Naruto, for their future. For your sake, I. With that, Guy's voice became a little low, and his expression was a little sad. It was the first time that Iruka had a spirit of never giving up, a perseverance, and a very contagious wood. Seeing this look on Yi Zijang's physical skills ninja's face, he couldn't help but was stunned. Advertisement. A Guy hadn't finished speaking yet, Xiao Li was already in tears and looked at Guy with emotion. Tenten's eyes were also red, and even Neji's expression was extremely complicated. The 3 of them flicked at Guy who had been vaguely before. Let Guy accompany them to ask Iruka to accept them as a disciple and regret it. Although it can be seen from Naruto and their current strength that Iruka's teaching level is indeed much higher than that of Guy, but because Iruka is better than Guy, they gave up on Guy, who had taught them for a long time, to study with Iruka, so realistic. What is the practice like? At this moment, thinking about it, a strong sense of guilt suddenly emerged in their hearts. Mr. Guy, As soon as Xiao Li spoke, Tenten continued, Mr. Guy, forget it, we still want to continue to follow your teachings. Hearing this, Guy suddenly became puzzled and looked at the 3 of them a little puzzled. What's the matter with you? Didn't you say, Halfway through Guy's words, Tenten suddenly jumped behind him and covered his mouth with his hands, not letting him continue. Neji, who had not spoken at this moment, stood up and watched Iruka's eyes flash with hesitation, but in the end still bowed deeply to him, and said very politely. I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. Iruka, but we came here to delay your time without thinking about it beforehand. I'm extremely sorry. Hearing that, Iruka finally recovered. From their reaction at this time and Guy's intermittent words, he could hear something. After all, he is not Izumi, so naturally he won't be as dull as her brain because of love. I thought that because the 3 of them wanted to become stronger quickly, they went to ask Guy to come to him. But now that things are coming, they suddenly realized that they felt that they were too kind to do so they regretted it, and finally gave up the original idea. Thinking of this, Iruka couldn't help but glanced at the 3 of them approvingly. Although they didn't hesitate about Guy's feelings because they were eager for success at the beginning, they were still children, and things were not considered comprehensively and understandably, but they realized their own feelings. If they give up this point for the wrong consequence, you can see that their essence is very good. If the 3 of them are in the same class as Naruto Sasuke and they are in the class he is in charge of, such a good seed will definitely be taken by him. It's a pity that there is no if in this world, and they who have missed the age of awakening the spiritual realm can't have superpowers like Naruto and others, they are destined to be impossible to compare with Naruto and others. However, it would be too arbitrary to define them as having no cultivation value. What are they doing? Quan Mei's face was puzzled, and she couldn't understand why the words of Guy's 3 students were not inconsistent with what he said. Of course, she couldn't see any tricks in her head overwhelmed by love. Iruka shook her head and did not explain to Izumi. Instead, she turned her around and walked around the corner. While walking, she looked a little disappointed behind her face without looking back, but there was no trace of regret. Said. I'm not good at physiques, so there is nothing to teach you. You should ask Guy for the knowledge of physiques, but if you are interested in the basics that I taught Naruto and others, at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, go to the first wait for me at the 6th exercise field. Hearing that, the three of them couldn't help but froze. After a while, joy suddenly appeared on their faces at the same time. Obviously, they were very interested in what Iruka taught Naruto. Izumi looked at Iruka as if she had seen a ghost, with question marks in her mind. Is this the famous teacher who has never taught students since Naruto and the others graduated? I'm not dreaming, am I? Iruka naturally noticed Izumi's disrespectful eyes, but he didn't intend to explain it to Izumi, because it was just that he thought Neji and the three of them were good seedlings, and they decided on a whim. There was no reason at all. And there are still 3 days left before the best treatment of 9 tails in Naruto. During this period of time, I am idle. Instead of wandering around aimlessly with Kwanmei, I might as well do something meaningful. While thinking about this, Iruka didn't notice that on the other side of the corner, a little girl with long black hair, long narrow bangs, and a pair of pupils like Hinata and Neji, was hearing his words. Later, a thoughtful look appeared on his little face, as if he was thinking of something. Master Hanabi, we should go back now. Standing next to her, the woman wearing a lotus skirt-made outfit with the same pupils as her couldn't help but remind her in a daze when she saw that she had been looking at Iruka's back in a daze. The servant's reminder finally brought the little girl named Hanabi back to her senses. She nodded gently, and after taking a deep look at Iruka's fading back, she turned around and headed towards Konoha with the maid. Walk to the residence of the rich family. Chapter 218. Is this Iruka? After cleaning up the dishes, Izumi walked to Iruka, who was lying on the sofa reading a novel that could not be more serious. She put her white jade hand on Iruka's shoulder and kneaded it lightly. Iruka is obviously accustomed to Izumi's service, and enjoys it comfortably. The atmosphere became a little warm for a while, but Izumi's eyes gradually became a little loose, and her eyes slowly lost focus, apparently thinking about something. After a while, Izumi suddenly looked at Iruka's profile inexplicably. After hesitating for a while, she still asked softly. Iruka, what is your purpose of training students this time? If it was before, there would be no need to worry about asking this kind of question, but now she is somewhat afraid of causing Iruka's disgust. But it turned out that she thought too much. Yep. Iruka turned his attention away from the book he was not very interested in, but because he lost his position as a single man, he had to abandon those precious collections. In order to pass the time, he had to reluctantly bring up the readings he was interested in, and turned his head. His face looked at Quan Mi inexplicably. Why do you ask? I am also a ninja teacher anyway. Since I am a ninja teacher and students come to the door, why should I refuse? Seeing that Iruka did not express dissatisfaction with herself, Izumi was relieved, and then she became courageous, because, didn't you have a certain purpose when you trained Naruto and Sasuke? And you don't like it. Do you work? Why did you agree so easily this time? Oh, this. Iruka put down the reading in her hand, then thought for a while, and said, I have nothing to say about Naruto and Sasuke. It is indeed a purpose-oriented teaching, but I have never done anything to Shikamaru. I have extra expectations for them other than being a teacher, and the reason why I don't want to teach the little ghosts in the ninja school now is partly because they are too far behind Shikamaru and the others. The only thing that can barely make me admire only Konohamaru is my eyes. I'm thinking about finding time to teach him. I'm quite satisfied with the 3 students of Guy. Anyway, I'm idle, so I'll help them. Iruka did not deny that he did not like to work before, because it is so, there is nothing to deny, but if he didn't work at the time, he could still use some single men's collections to pass the time. Now he has officially become a lover with Izumi, and looking at those things is a bit outrageous. He doesn't like to read those serious books, so he really doesn't know how to pass the time if he is not serious about being a ninja teacher. But even if he decides to teach seriously, his teaching plan will not change. In other words, whether a student has the value of training depends entirely on his own arbitrary judgment, if he feels that there is no value in training. I'm sorry, even if you are heaven-defying in the background, I'm not a bird. Izumi was about to talk when a black shadow suddenly jumped up and landed firmly on Iruka's belly, then raised his round little head, a pair of pale golden cat eyes looking at Izumi with provocative meaning. That extremely humane look made Iruka and Izumi stunned at the same time. After a while, the provoked Izumi couldn't help but raise her brows, and immediately rolled up her sleeves and reached out to catch Xiaohei. Upon seeing this, Xiaohei suddenly showed a look of fear, and Chuchu pitifully shrank into Iruka's arms, but Iruka reluctantly raised his hand and held Kwanmei's wrist and said, I said Kwanmei, although I don't know why I was young. Haihui hates you so much, but you don't have to worry about a cat, right? Put your hands down and have something to say. Hearing this, Kwanmei immediately retracted her hand very uncomfortably. For your sake, Iruka, I have a large number of you, please forgive this ungrateful and ignorant stinky cat. Upon hearing this, Iruka suddenly didn't know what to say. Although Kwanmei is angry, there is really nothing to refute what she said, because at home, Kwanmei always prepares 3 meals a day, not just him, Xiaohei eats dishes carefully prepared by Kwanmei every day. Xiaohei, this is really ungrateful. And Quan Mi tried to make a good relationship with Xiaohei more than once, but every time she was greeted by Xiaohei's unusually sharp claws. Quan Mei, as the hostess of this house, Xiaohei always resisted Izumi's approach. It's not an exaggeration to say that it doesn't know how to promote it. The contradiction between Xiaohei and Izumi has been around for a long time, and the ghost knows what the reason is. Fortunately, although Quan Mei is often blown up by Xiaohei, she never mentioned that this cat, which doesn't look like a cat, should be driven out of the house to some extent. Above all, Quan Mei is indeed a generous and good woman. Although it's too sloppy to use a cat as the standard. As if he understood what Quan Mei said, Xiaohei suddenly raised his head, opened his mouth, and then suddenly stretched out his pink tongue towards Quan Mei. Extremely naughty look. Upon seeing this, Iruka was turned over instantly. After all, he liked cats in the first place. Although Xiaohei is very strange, no matter whether it is shiny black hair or the right size, Iruka's eyes are attracted to him, so he has leisure time. I often teased Xiaohei. The reason why I was reading that boring book just now was because Xiaohei was not there. I don't know why. Recently, Xiaohei is always mysterious. When I go out, I don't come back for a long time. He will definitely be extremely hungry when he comes back. As a ninja, he and Izumi have a lot, and God knows why it needs so much energy. However, it was only Iruka that was turned over by Xiaohei. The more I looked at the cat's face, Izumi Mei, who was targeted by Xiaohei, became more angry. But seeing Iruka, she knew that she could not treat Xiaohei at all, so she stared at Xiaohei fiercely. After a glance, she turned around and walked towards the bathroom, looking out of sight or disturbing. Advertisement. As Konoha's strongest family and Konoha's largest wealthy family, the Hyuga clan is naturally outrageous. As the heirs of the family, Hinata and the patriarch Hyuga Hiyashi applied for an independent practice field 2 years ago. There are a lot of equipment needed for Iruka's training plan specially formulated for her. At this time, under the moonlight, Hinata was standing in the middle of the practice field with his eyes closed, slightly bowed, hands placed back and forth, palms facing the front, in a standard fighting posture. About 10 meters away in front of her, there is a human-shaped target, which is made of wood that is extremely sensitive to chakra. The various acupuncture points of the chakra, meridian system, of the human body are marked with red dots. This is a target used to practice gentle fist acupuncture. However, it is strange that acupuncture is obviously used to inflict chakra into the enemy's acupoint during close hand-to-hand combat, making it impossible to refine chakra's moves. Hinata chose to stand far away. Hinata took a deep breath. After exhaling a foul breath, she suddenly opened her eyes, and then quickly extracted chakra and gathered it on her fingertips, moving her legs slightly, as if an 8 trigrams pattern appeared under her feet, and then her hands suddenly turned forward. Stabbed. Gentle fist method, empty finger, 8 trigrams 64 palms. Whoosh whoosh, a sharp sound of breaking wind suddenly sounded in the air. As Hinata waved his hands back and forth quickly, dozens of small needle-shaped chakras that were invisible to the naked eye were like machine guns, flying out continuously at high speed. The next moment, a human-shaped target not far away. Suddenly there was a sound of duo, and then I saw the red dots on the target that marked the acupuncture points suddenly sink in strangely. Except for the red dots that marked the acupuncture points, there were only 4 or 5 blank places around the target. Go down. Hoo-ha. Although it was just a practice, after using this technique to tap acupuncture points from a distance, Hinata's face was already covered with fine sweat, and he kept breathing heavily. Obviously, this trick is still too reluctant for her now. Although chakra is not very expensive, it takes too much energy to aim at a long distance, so the burden is naturally too big. Happiness. There was a sudden applause behind her, and then Hinata heard a familiar and old voice. When she turned her head and looked over, she saw an old man who could no longer see his pupils slowly put down his hands and walked towards him slowly. Beside him, a middle-aged man with long hair walked side by side with him. It deserves to be the best heir to our Hyuga family, who can actually develop this kind of remote acupuncture technique. Very good, Hinata, maintain this momentum. In the future, you will be able to surpass your ancestors and become the strongest patriarch. The old man's face is full of admiration. In his opinion, Hinata is so good, it is more than enough to fulfill the mission of Hyuga family for generations to defend Byakugan. You must know that Hinata learned revolving heaven at the age of 8. At the age of 9, he developed a new technique that suits him for the first time. At the age of 10, Hyuga Hiyashi, who is her father and the current patriarch, has to take it seriously. At the age of 12 it can force Hiyashi to exert all his strength. At the age of 13, although Hiyashi is still better than Hinata, he can no longer defeat her 100%. You know that Hinata has only graduated from the ninja school for less than a year. At the beginning of life, she can grow to this point. Who can imagine her future achievements? Of course, Iruka must know it. A touch of relief flashed on Hiyashi's cold face. Obviously, for Hinata's excellence, although he was not happy on the face, he clearly recognized Hinata's excellence in his heart. Hearing the boast of the most senior elder in the clan, Hinata's small face flashed inexplicably resistance, but in the end she nodded and replied, "Yes, I will work hard." Hearing this, the old man nodded with information, then patted Hinata on the shoulder, and said a few words of encouragement. Hiyashi on the side reminded Hinata not to relax, but not to be too desperate. It showed that the patriarch should have Hinata's seriousness and calmness, as well as showing the concern for his daughter that a father should have, made Hinata feel warm. Compared with the old man's attitude of only caring about the family and ignoring her wishes, Hiyashi is obviously more humane. The old man just came to take a look at Hinata's training situation. After seeing Hinata's satisfactory strength, He took Hiyashi away contentedly, and the moment their figure disappeared at the door, Hinata suddenly turned his head. Looking at a wooden stake not far away for strength cultivation, a gentle color appeared on his small face. Hanabi, come out. Father and elders are gone. When the words fell, a soft noise suddenly sounded from behind the wooden stake. The next moment, a petite figure walked out, then scratched his head and walked slowly towards Hinata, a little embarrassed. I'm sorry, sister, come here so late to disturb your practice. Chapter 219 The Hostess and the Cat. I said, isn't this number of people playing a bit weird? It's not the same as I thought. Iruka looked at a row of physique trio standing in front of them, and a pair of Byakugan sisters behind them, and the physique madman standing beside them, whose brains were a match for the beasts. He had some lack of energy. Suddenly it became a dead fish eye with a negative motivation, and his whole body exuded a lazy aura. Hinata and that little girl don't talk about it. Guy, why don't I remember I asked you to come over? Hearing Iruka's question, Guy suddenly ignited for some reason, with a look full of enthusiasm. Please forgive me for being uninvited, Mr. Iruka, I really want to see how you have done to Naruto and the others. The training of burning youth, maybe I can also get inspiration from it and reach the new climax of youth. Ouch, hurry up, Mr. Iruka, I can't wait. Why don't I remember what shit youth I had when I taught Naruto them before? Iruka flipped through Byakugan, and then directly ignored Guy who thinks completely different from normal people, and looked at Hinata with a clear question in his eyes. Color. As long as Iruka's students face Iruka, they will have a trace of awe. Hinata is no exception. When Iruka looks at her, her body trembles instinctively. After feeling the trembling of her sister, Hanabi, who was holding her little hand, thought that Iruka was blaming Hinata, and immediately broke free of Hinata's hand, and then stood in front of Hinata, looking at Iruka with great momentum. I asked my sister to bring me here because I wanted to worship you as a teacher. If you refuse, then forget it, but you are not allowed to blame my sister. Being glared at by the little girl, Iruka suddenly felt like he was a vulgar villain who bullied children, and then he suddenly remembered that it seemed that every time he felt this feeling rise from the bottom of his heart, it was a soft girl who looked weak and bullied. Hinata's expression turned a little weird. Hanabi, don't talk nonsense. Hinata quickly stopped Hanabi from speaking, then looked at Iruka apologetically, and said weakly, Iruka, I'm sorry, Stop. In order not to cause strange misunderstandings, Iruka decisively prevented Hinata from speaking. Needless to say, I already understand the situation. This girl wants to be my student, right? As he said, Iruka's gaze shifted slightly down, and he looked at Hanabi, whose small face had a stubborn color. After noticing his gaze, Hanabi looked back at Iruka without showing any weakness. The two of them, the young and the young, were in such a tacit understanding. Looked at each other for a few seconds. Hyuga Hanabi. Iruka groaned, and then slowly said under Hinata's rather nervous gaze, the aptitude is average, but the eyes are good, it's a good seed. Well, anyway, I am idle anyway. I'll just add a little more work. Hearing this, Hinata breathed a sigh of relief and bowed deeply to Iruka. Thank you, Mr. Iruka. Nothing. Iruka nodded and responded casually. At this moment, Hinata walked behind Hanabi, bent down, put it on Hanabi's shoulder, and said softly, Hanabi, say hello to Mrs. Iruka. Hanabi's little face was a little unhappy. Iruka's appearance was not an approachable type, and the impression she had just given her was a bit bad, which made her a little repulsive and regretted going to Iruka as a teacher. But now it's too late to regret, and the matter is over. Even if she is not happy, there is nothing she can do. Please advise, Mr. Iruka. Hearing this rather unwilling voice, Iruka frowned, looking at the little head bowing towards her. A thoughtful look flashed across her face. Advertisement. This little girl doesn't seem to be very much to see me. By the way, didn't she go to Hinata because she wanted to worship me as a teacher? What the hell is this attitude now? Thinking of this, Iruka couldn't help but flipping through Byakugan, and then responded in a perfunctory manner, and stopped focusing on the uninvited Hyuga clan sisters, looking at the three real protagonists today. Guy, Hinata, Hanabi, you guys avoid it. Yes, Mrs. Iruka. Is it finally going to start? Quote. Hinata took Hanabi and walked back to a place tens of meters behind Iruka, and then sat on the lawn with Hanabi. The next moment, accompanied by a strong wind, Guy suddenly appeared next to the two of them with emotion. Hinata said. It's no wonder that Red said you are the only ninja among Iruka's students who can compete with Uchiha Sasuke in physical skills. At the age of 13, he already has a speed comparable to Jonin, a master of physical skills, plus Byakugan's ability. It seems that the name of Konoha's strongest physical ninja will fall on you in the future. Hearing this, Hinata shook her head and her face was reddened. Even though Konoha's strongest body ninja Guy had such a high evaluation at this time, she did not show a trace of pride. On the contrary, she was embarrassed. Guy, please don't say that. I'm not that good. Compared to Naruto-kun and Sasuke-kun, I'm still far behind. Ha, Hinata, you are so modest, but you are not allowed to be young. You are the number one in physical skills mentioned by Mr. Iruka in the graduation general evaluation form. You don't show confidence to fight for Konoha's first physical skills. Ninja, how can you live up to what Mr. Iruka expects of you? Hearing this, Hinata couldn't help but was stunned. It was the first time she heard that Iruka had such a high evaluation of herself. At this time, Hanabi suddenly intervened and interrupted the conversation between the two. Why are you always Iruka teacher? Is that man really so powerful? Why can't I see it at all? Hanabi came to visit his teacher completely because Iruka is Hinata's most respected teacher, and his father Hyuga Hiyashi often mentioned his name, subconsciously thinking Iruka is a powerful ninja, but after the contact just now, she doubted Iruka's ability. She thinks that a powerful ninja should always be serious like her father, exuding a regular aura, making people involuntarily awe, and in Iruka, she can't see anything special at all. Place. She even thinks that Hinata's achievements today are entirely Hinata's own talents. Iruka is just lucky and just happened to meet a group of highly talented students, even if he changes to another teacher, he can do it easily. Hearing this, Hinata's face suddenly changed slightly, and a violent anger suddenly appeared on her soft face. Although her personality has always been soft and weak, and even a bit introverted, as one of the 9 students that Iruka focused on training, she naturally respects Iruka like everyone else, and respects him from the heart. Anything to Iruka her slander and suspicion will cause her dissatisfaction and even hostility. Hinata subconsciously wanted to blame Hanabi for his disrespect for Iruka, but at this moment, the earth trembled suddenly, and Hanabi suddenly fell into Hinata's arms unexpectedly. Before Hanabi could stabilize his figure, Iruka suddenly sounded in his ears. That unique lazy voice. Hey, you guys are too close, go a little further, otherwise, don't blame me if you were injured by mistake. When the words fell, a deafening roar suddenly sounded not far from the 3 of them. When Hanabi raised her head and saw the place making a huge movement, her big bright eyes suddenly appeared incomparably shocking. Chapter 220 Hanabi's Suspicion. I have been too busy with the graduation project recently, so there are problems with the update, but my brother promises that no matter how busy I am, I will take time to do this. This book will definitely be finished. Please rest assured. This is the training conducted by Naruto when they were 7 years old. The purpose is to train their reaction speed. Now it is just a little bit more difficult on the basis of the time. If you can't even do this, then I don't need to say to you. What should happen too? Iruka hugs her chest, her feet are in the air, and she is quietly suspended in midair. The hem of the casual clothes that a ninja should wear and the narrow bangs sway back and forth in the strong wind, exuding the ethereal atmosphere of independence, mysterious and powerful. Gudong. Tenten couldn't help but swallowed, her little face was covered with cold sweat, her pupils had not recovered until now, and what was reflected in her pupils was a huge black shadow made up of countless dense khaki karma. The entire sky is covered by the cloud of suffering. In the face of such an astonishing number, even the best Neji of their class was nervous. Only Xiao Li remained high-spirited and silently opened the 8 inner gates. The first 2 doors. Looking up at Iruka, who is standing in the sky as if Kun is facing the world, Hanabi's big bright eyes are full of admiration. At this time, she has no doubt about Iruka's strength. Iruka didn't suppress his voice, so Hanabi could hear clearly, and couldn't help but look at Hinata, who was showing nostalgia behind Iruka's words, and said in surprise. Sister, did you have this kind of training when you were 7? Hearing this, Hinata nodded lightly, recalling the situation at that time, there was an inexplicable blush on her face. At that time, Naruto stood stubbornly in front of her, supported her with a stable sky with a thin but extremely strong body, and finally stood and fainted. At that time, Naruto's back was completely engraved in Hinata's heart, which will never be remembered. Although in the end only she and Naruto were judged as failing, but she did not have a trace of frustration, but was extremely happy. That mood has not dissipated until now, because it has become the feeling that has accompanied her all her life. That was the first training that Mr. Iruka officially instructed us, but because we were still young, the difficulty was not very difficult. Everyone just only needed to avoid more than 500 karma. And that's it. Guy looked at Hinata dumbfounded. Although he was still practicing hard when he was 7 years old, he only continued to challenge the limit and strengthen the basic training of physical fitness. He didn't even think about directing this kind of avoidance training that is close to actual combat. And listening to Hinata's tone, this kind of difficult training seems to be just an appetizer. How could Guy not be surprised? It became more and more difficult for him to imagine how hard Naruto and the others had gone through to achieve their current achievements. What you have to do is the same as Naruto and others. Try not to be shot by Kuwu. I will score based on your performance. I don't require you to reach an excellent level, as long as you can pass. After all, this is just to let me know your strength. In order to make a teaching plan for you. Hearing this, Neji and the others sighed in relief, but Hinata's face changed in the distance. What's wrong, sister? Noting the change in Hinata's face, Hanabi asked suspiciously, and Guy also looked over. Oh, Mr. Iruka hasn't recognized Neji's brother yet. Hinata's words caused both of them to be astonished at the same time. Hanabi was puzzled. Why? Sister, didn't Mrs. Iruka just say to help Neji brother and them test and make a teaching plan? Advertisement. Yes, Hinata, did you make a mistake? Hinata was about to talk when Iruka suddenly raised the corner of his mouth, revealing a meaningful smile, so. Consciousness instantly connects to the spiritual realm, and personal reality completely covers a space of 300 meters in radius. It started. When the words fell, Iruka suddenly opened his hands, as if he was about to hold up the entire world. All the soil kunai suddenly condensed with Iruka's movements, and then suddenly with an extremely strong sound of breaking through the sky, he quickly moved towards the bottom of the trio. Fly away. Whoosh whoosh. The earthy yellow light poured straight down, almost instantly submerging the 3 of them. Ding 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 ding. A series of metal clashes sounded, and under countless earth yellow lights, the three of them kept swinging their bodies, trying their best to block or avoid the shooting kunai. In a short while, the breath of the three of them began to heavier, and their movements became a little slower than at the beginning. Obviously, this kind of high concentration and uninterrupted movement caused a great burden on their bodies. Brother Neji can definitely cope with this level, but this is only a superficial test. What Mrs. Iruka really wants to test is definitely not Brother Neji and their current strength. Seeing that not far away, although the speed was fast, but did not really hurt Neji and their khaki light, Hinata's face became anxious, and he looked anxious. Ms. Iruka took a similar test when I was our class teacher. Naruto-kun and I were selected by Mrs. Iruka because we passed the real test hidden in the surface test. The more Hinata talked about it, the more anxious she got. After the Chunin exam and Neji's duel, her relationship with Neji is much better than before. Although she has been practicing with Naruto, she can't practice gentle fist with him, but she usually meets each other. She will talk for a while, so she very much hopes that Neji can become a student of Iruka. Now Neji and the others are probably not aware of the real test hidden in this difficult but not difficult test. If that were the case, they would be just like the gravity test conducted when Iruka was just their head teacher. Those students who can stand up but give up perseverance are directly eliminated. The real test? Hanabi asked, tilting his head. Well, Mr. Iruka used this method to select students at the beginning. He once said that what he really values is not the superficial strength, but the will hidden in his heart. Thinking of Iruka's previous teachings, Hinata's heart became more uneasy, but no matter how uneasy she was, she could not interfere in this inconsistent test. Otherwise, not only Neji and the others would definitely lose the qualifications to become Iruka students, she also will definitely be implicated. Iruka's treatment of students will not be curtailed because they are girls. You must know that Sakura and Ino had somehow known bad things about Iruka behind their backs, and they were punished to put Konoha in all public toilets. Clean it again, including the men's room. Although Iruka never punished her, she did not dare to offend Iruka's majesty. Hearing this, Hanabi's face suddenly became complicated, but Guy on the side fell silent. After a while, the rare deep color on Guy's face slowly disappeared, replaced by a slightly reassuring smile. Don't worry, Hinata, Neji, they will definitely pass the test of Mr. Iruka. I believe they will never disappoint my expectations.